In Seijo Setagaya City, Tokyo metropolis, lies a luxurious manor where 7 beautiful siblings reside, with their servants tending to their every need. At the dining table, Arata and Shion discuss matters of the heart. Arata struggles to ask out a girl he likes, while Shion can't understand the problem. Coming from a wealthy and influential family, Shion believes Arata should have no trouble attracting any girl he desires. Their conversation is soon interrupted when the rest of their siblings arrive. Luca is the first to complain, clearly annoyed at such a gloomy topic first thing in the morning. Luca accuses the two of speaking inappropriately about Shion's girlfriend, but Shion quickly diverts the conversation by teasing Oka about her developing figure. Embarrassed and irritated, Luca calls her dog, Velzakil, on Arata, letting him take the punishment. The other sisters watch with amusement, playfully accusing Arata of being a pervert even towards them. Arata tries to defend himself, but Seiha brings up a mysterious incident involving Kotono, making things even more awkward. Kotono remains quiet, though an uneasy expression flashes across her face. Banri then steps in to lightly scold Arata. Luca shifts the blame toward Banri, saying it's her fault for spoiling Arata too much. Banri casually shrugs it off, remarking that his behavior probably stems from being constantly surrounded by beautiful girls, referring to themselves, of course. Seiha sharply disagrees, pointing out that incest is neither normal nor socially acceptable. Manami tries to soften the mood, saying she believes Arata is a good person. Encouraged, Arata moves in for a grateful hug, but Manami swiftly punches him, blaming her reaction on the fighting game she had been playing recently. The siblings then tease Arata, claiming he's wasting his good genes because of his terrible personality. Despite this, they remind their brothers about the outing they all agreed to have on Saturday. Kotono appears slightly concerned that Arata might not make it, but he reassures her that he'll be there. Later, at the train station on their way to school, some students spot the 5 sisters chatting together. Their beauty doesn't go unnoticed. Rumors say each sister even has her own fan club. The 2 brothers standing nearby also draw attention. Girls swoon over their looks while boys envy Arata's muscular build. At school, Arata and Shion take a quick detour to the restroom. There, Arata confides that it feels strange when people openly say they envy how the siblings live together. According to him, outsiders have no idea what it's really like. Living with 5 sisters means everything and everyone is biased in their favor. More often than not, he and Shion end up on the losing side of every argument. Shion often reflects on how people outside their family have a completely skewed idea of what it's like living with 5 beautiful sisters. To outsiders, it must seem like a dream, almost like living in a real-life harem. He knows that's far from the truth, but he can't deny that each of his sisters possesses qualities that make them immensely popular. Banri, the eldest at 18, is a model student enrolled in a prestigious university. Seiha, the second eldest, is known for her brilliance and calm composure. Luca stands out with her energetic and competitive spirit. Manami, the 4th sister, is widely regarded as a prodigy. And then there's Kotono, the quietest of the siblings. To Arata, though, these so-called charms are nothing special. They're just his sisters. He's never seen them the way others do. But despite his indifference, Shion is quick to remind him of the recent incident with Kotono, a memory that still lingers in Arata's mind. Kotono had confessed her feelings to him, and although Arata had rejected her immediately, citing their sibling relationship, the moment left a mark on both of them. While lost in thought, Arata spots a familiar figure passing by the window. It's the girl he likes. Her presence instantly shifts his focus. Shion, noticing the change in his demeanor, seems to recall yet another failed attempt by Arata to confess, deepening his frustration. Later that evening, Arata lies in bed, scrolling through the girl's social media page. His thumb hovers over the Add Friend button. The fear of rejection and Shion's earlier remarks weigh heavily on him, and in the end, he decides against sending the request. Luca interrupts his thoughts, barging into his room to borrow his notes. While flipping through his notebook, she expresses genuine surprise at how neat and well-organized his handwriting is. Arata, however, becomes distracted by her outfit, more revealing than usual, and can't help but notice. Luca brushes it off casually as the two have shared a close bond since childhood, especially as twins. During their interaction, Luca suddenly remembers Arata's crush. Her curiosity piqued, she presses him until he finally, albeit reluctantly, admits that he has feelings for Rara from the student council. Excited by the revelation, Luca pulls out her phone, ready to play matchmaker. Before she can act, Arata stops her, insisting on handling it himself. Offended by his refusal of help, Luca leaves his room in a huff, tossing a few sarcastic remarks his way as she slams the door behind her. Elsewhere in the house, Kotono sits on her bed, grasping a family photo. Her gaze lingers on Arata's image, her expression unreadable. One quiet afternoon, as school ends, Arata walks alone, deep in thought, as he wonders what life might have been like if he weren't a part of the Shionji family. If he were someone else's son, maybe things would have been simpler, less chaotic, less emotionally tangled. As he walks further ahead on his usual path home, he spots Rara, the girl he secretly likes, running up to another guy. She's smiling brightly, her expression glowing with excitement. The sight stings more than you expect. At that moment, Arata realizes he's probably missed his chance. At home, he sits in his room, already dressed neatly for the evening. Tonight is Kotono's birthday, and the family is hosting a quiet celebration. As the clock ticks closer to 7 p.m., Arata waits before deciding it's safe to leave the solitude of his room. Stepping into the hallway, he's immediately met by Oka, who looks stunning in her dress. As he walks into the dining room with the others, Arata's thoughts remain tangled. He fixates on fate, how it seems fixed, inescapable. No matter how much he struggles, things just don't change. The silence is broken when Aoka suddenly starts scolding Minami for losing one of her AirPods. Minami shrugs off the criticism and promises to find it tomorrow, but Oka has already launched into a full rant about responsibility and how Minami focuses too much on sports. The tone quickly escalates and tension fills the room. Annoyed, Arata raises his voice, snapping at them both. He reminds everyone that they're family and shouldn't waste time on petty arguments. Seiga steps in to back him up, urging everyone to settle down, especially since their father is due to arrive any minute. Almost on cue, Kaname enters the room, his usual cheerful demeanor intact. He greets his children warmly and takes his seat at the head of the table. As everyone settles down, Banri lifts her glass, about to begin a toast for Kotono's birthday, until their father interrupts. Kaname asks for everyone's attention and reveals something that rocks the very foundation of their lives. None of them, he says, are biologically related, except for Shion and Minami, who are actual twins. The room goes still. Arata and Uka stare at each other, confusion and disbelief etched into their faces. For years, they believed they were twins, close in age, raised as a pair. Kaname explains that he and his wife Chihiro had always planned to tell the truth once Kotono turned 15. He apologizes for the secrecy and promises never to lie to them again. He encourages everyone to enjoy dinner as planned, as though the revelation hasn't shattered their reality. As the appetizers arrive, the siblings sit in stunned silence. Each one processes the news differently. After the meal, the siblings regroup in the living room over tea. The siblings are amazed that Minami still managed to eat normally, while the rest of them struggle to even enjoy the meal. Luka voices her irritation at the timing of their father's announcement, calling it inappropriate. Seiya argues otherwise, saying that delaying it further would only make things worse. Minami tries to lighten the mood, playfully encouraging Oka to relax. Seiya then turns to Banri, hoping she might remember something from the time Kotono joined the family. Since Banri was 4 then, she has the best chance of recalling early memories. But Banri nervously denies knowing anything, making the siblings suspicious. Seeing that everyone is disappointed by her silence, Banri finally speaks up. She explains that even if she did notice anything strange back then, it hardly matters now. They spent their entire lives growing up together, laughing, arguing, sharing memories, so it's impossible for her to see any of them as anything other than siblings. Family isn't always defined by blood, she says. Almost everyone seems satisfied with her answer, and they quietly agree to call it a night. As the siblings retreat to their bedrooms, Uka notices Arata lingering in the break room, staring ahead with a troubled look on his face. Eventually, Arata returns to his room and lies down on his bed, but his thoughts remain restless. The revelation still loops in his head. Banri's words echo. Nothing changes, they're still a family. He agrees it's the only way to keep things from falling apart. Still, he's reminded of Rara, of seeing her with another guy earlier. The sting of regret and rejection makes him want to forget the day entirely. Hoping to clear his mind, he decides a bath might help. As Arata steps into the bathroom, he notices a bra inside the hamper. He sighs in frustration, wondering if his life is starting to resemble some bizarre harem anime. Shaking the thought from his mind, he proceeds into the bathing area, only to freeze. Kotono is already in the tub. Stunned, he quickly turns and starts to leave, only to hear Kotono softly call for him. She asks him to help wash her back, her tone calm and innocent. Fully dressed, Arata kneels beside the tub and gently scrubs her back, all while quietly scolding her for still needing this kind of help. Kotono simply smiles and admits that she finds comfort in feeling his strength. It reminds her of how safe she feels when he's around. Once finished, Arata gives her a brief reminder on proper bathing etiquette and how she needs to warm up properly. When he hears Kotono agree with him, he turns to leave the bathroom. Elsewhere in the house, Uka sits alone in the dining area, sipping tea in silence. Shion soon finds her and joins her, sensing her mood. She admits she feels bad. Today was supposed to be a celebration for Kotono, yet it was overshadowed by something so heavy. She also confesses her concern for Arata, especially since they were raised as twins. That shared identity, that bond, feels fragile now. Shion reassures her. Arata may seem shaken, but he's confident that their brother will carry on as he always has, dutiful, protective, and reliable. He even admits he's somewhat relieved that he and Minami are still true siblings, real twins. But then, a darker thought crosses his mind. He wonders what will happen if this information reaches the public. How will it affect their family's reputation and their public image? He also wonders if this opens the door for sibling marriage. Back in the bathroom, just as Arata is about to head out, Kotono surprises him, rushing up from behind and wrapping her arms around him in a silent, intimate embrace. Arata is frozen in shock as Kotono suddenly stands and wraps her arms around him from behind. Meanwhile, in the dining room, Uka is bewildered. The idea of romantic relationships between siblings, real or not, strikes her as absurd. She finds it hard to believe anyone in their family would consider something like that. Yet her mind can't shake the memory of Arata's recent stares, the way his eyes seem to linger a little longer on his sisters than before. Her thoughts spiral further. She suddenly remembers the incident between Arata and Kotono, the one she witnessed where Arata had pinned Kotono to the floor. She never knew the full story, only what it looked like at first glance. Now curious, she presses Shion for the truth. Shion hesitates, clearly unsure if it's the right thing to share. But seeing Uka's serious expression, he finally relents. He tells her that Kotono had confessed her feelings to Arata that day. The scene Uka witnessed happened because Kotono had lunged forward to hug him and Arata, caught off guard, tried to stop her. They ended up falling to the floor. Uka rubs her temples in disbelief. It sounds ridiculous, but she knows Kotono well enough to believe it. Kotono has always been unpredictable and emotionally intense. That sort of impulsive behavior fits her. Still, it worries both Uka and Shiyun. Now that Kotono knows they aren't blood relatives, there's a possibility she may pursue a relationship with Arata. Back in the bathroom, Kotono clutches Arata tighter and tries to confess again. Her voice trembles as she explains her feelings. She doesn't understand why he keeps rejecting her. If they're not truly related, then there should no longer be an issue. She fears that others will see her as strange or wrong, but her love for Arata feels too overwhelming to ignore. Moved by the sincerity in her voice, Arata gently turns around to face her. He reassures her that she's not a bad person, but suggests she might be confusing her emotions, especially at her age. Puberty can twist feelings into something they're not. He reminds her that even if they aren't blood siblings, they were raised as family, and he sees it as his responsibility to protect her, not to return her feelings. He promises to be there for her until she finds someone to love and eventually marry. Heartbroken by another rejection, Kotono nods and quietly returns to the tub. Arata gives her a soft, happy birthday before stepping out. As he tries to sneak back to his room, unaware that one of his sisters has been nearby, Banri then enters her father's study, ready to confront him about their family. Arata makes his way to his room and breathes a sigh of relief. He wonders what pushed Kotono to confess again. The timing can't be a coincidence. Surely the news of their adoption gave her the confidence to act on her feelings. As he opens his door, he finds Seiha already sitting on his bed looking unimpressed. She asks where he's been and he casually lies, saying he just went for a walk around the estate. But Seiha doesn't buy it. Instead of pushing the topic, she makes a comment about his room. The smallest among the siblings. But tonight, she says, it feels oddly spacious. They both remember how they all once played rock, paper, scissors to decide who got which room. Uka had dominated every round and claimed the largest space, while he come in last place, landing him in his current room. Arata watches Seiha carefully, waiting for her to explain her presence in his room, but she says nothing. Instead, she casually explores his space. Without any warning, she pushes him backward onto his bed and climbs on top of him. His body tenses immediately, his thoughts spiraling as she presses her ear gently to his chest. His mind races. The possibility that Seiha might be acting on something deeper, like Kotono had, is unsettling. Ever since their father's revelation, nothing feels certain anymore. But then she shifts away. There's no flirtation in her expression, only something close to scientific interest. She appears relieved, as if she had been testing something and found the result within acceptable limits. Seiha reveals that she overheard and witnessed Kotono and Arata in the bathroom earlier. Arata shoves her off comically, still overwhelmed by the absurdity of everything. Seiha, however, remains composed. She appears to be reasoning out the dynamics now that the truth about their family ties has changed. To her, the emotional confusion of the others, especially Kotono, seems understandable. What once would have been impossible is now within the realm of possibility. She explains casually how societal and legal norms are structured, not around social perception but biological concerns. In her view, the barrier that once existed is gone, and it would be hypocritical to pretend otherwise. She seems to test Arata, watching his reaction carefully, gauging his boundaries. Though she reassures him that she has no interest in him romantically, she can't say the same for her sisters and acknowledges the possibility of them coming onto him eventually. Then she stands and heads to the door. Her movements are deliberate. Before leaving, she reminds him of their roles as siblings. She is older than him. She wants to be addressed with respect or be given a cuter nickname than simply being called by her first name. As the door closes, Arata collapses on his bed, overwhelmed and unable to organize his thoughts. Everything feels too loud in his head. The revelation, Kotomo's actions, Seiha's strange emotional logic. It's all too much. Outside his room, Seiha pauses. She looks down at her palm, clenched slightly as if reassuring herself that everything she feels is natural. She stands there for a moment before Manami notices her. Seiha retreats silently to her own room. Morning arrives. Arata hasn't slept a minute. The weight of yesterday's revelations lingers in his body. He prepares for school and finally steps into the hallway. There he stops in his tracks. Banri gestures toward her outfit proudly, excited about her internship and her new uniform. She reveals she gave her spare for Kotono to try and is curious to know what he thinks. Arata deflects Banri's question with a vague answer, hoping to avoid any awkward explanation. Banri assumes his reaction is a sign of disapproval. Her expression drops and she clings to Kotono, seeking comfort in her younger sister's arms. Arata watches her and makes an attempt to reassure her that her new uniform is nice, but also reminds her of the time. The school day is about to begin. Just like that, she begins tugging at the nurse uniform Kotono is wearing, trying to help her change quickly. The high school-aged siblings walk together towards school, the girls naturally forming their own little group ahead, while Arata and Shiyun lag behind. As they pass by clusters of students, a few nearby boys murmur with obvious admiration, their eyes trailing the girls. His gaze lingers for a moment on the group ahead. Despite everything that happened, the girls appear unbothered, their usual energy and confidence intact. Shion appears to reflect on this, silently wondering what would happen if their family's secret became public knowledge. Arata, however, quickly tells him to lower his voice, clearly not wanting rumors to begin. The day unfolds without any disruptions. Classes run smoothly. No one mentions the previous night's announcement. Yet when Arata bends to retrieve his shoes, a heaviness settles over him again. Despite his outward calm, the emotional weight refuses to lift. Kotono had made her feelings known, and Seiha had shown unusual vulnerability. There must be something stirring beneath the surface. Minami appears beside him, apparently done for the day due to canceled club activities. He watches her for a moment. Among all of them, Minami seems the least affected. Always energetic, always cheerful, Arata merely shakes his head and continues walking toward the school's exit. Minami keeps pace with him, the conversation light as he offers vague praise for her athletic achievements. As they step out of the building, they are suddenly surrounded. A group of girls rushes toward them, though their attention is completely focused on Minami. They huddle around her, excitedly asking for photos, complimenting her appearance and buzzing with admiration. Arata stands just outside the circle, entirely ignored. Once the group disperses, he finally processes the situation. He hadn't realized just how popular Minami had become. She explains that a photo of her in a male school uniform had recently gone viral, earning her a cult following of sorts. Arata can't help but feel a little downcast. He wonders how Minami can attract so much attention without trying, while he struggles to get the attention of his own crush. He pushes the thought aside and shifts his focus, asking her about her plans now that she's free for the afternoon. Minami finally admits with a nervous laugh that the reason she had no club activities today was because she failed her recent aptitude exam. As a result, the school placed her on academic probation, requiring her to skip club until her grades improved. Despite her usual cheerful exterior, it's clear the news weighs heavily on her. Seeing how disappointed she is, Arata offers to tutor her for the afternoon. Instead of heading home, they make a detour to a nearby karaoke place and rent a private room. The booth offers a sense of freedom and isolation, a place to focus without too many distractions. At least that's the plan. They start strong with Arata walking Minami through the review sheets and quizzes. However, her attention quickly strays, especially when the karaoke songbook catches her eye. After a while, he quizzes her on what they've gone through. To his surprise and frustration, she manages to get nearly every answer wrong. Suddenly, the karaoke machine begins playing one of Minami's favorite songs. Without hesitation, she jumps up and grabs the mic, already halfway through the intro before he can protest. Arata wants to stop her, but he pauses when he hears the lyrics. The song humorously details a girl who only wants to play tennis and avoid studying altogether. It's so fitting to their current situation that he bursts into laughter. In that moment, he gives up on tutoring for the day. Watching Minami sing with all her energy, he chooses instead to enjoy the moment. After the session, they head toward the counter to settle their bill. As they reach the front, Arata spots Lala with her boyfriend in the lobby. His posture stiffens immediately, and he ducks away. Minami catches on quickly and glances toward the couple. Putting the pieces together, she realizes Lala must be the girl Arata had been in love with. As they walk home together under the setting sun, Minami expresses gratitude for the day, something to balance out the emotional weight of yesterday's revelation. She then confesses her growing curiosity about her biological parents and mentions wanting to ask their father about them someday. Her tone shifts slightly as she jokes about how Arata is technically no longer her brother, but her upperclassman instead. The teasing stings a little, but her sincerity soon follows. She reassures him that their 15-year bond can't be erased by bloodlines. That connection is real, regardless of names or technicalities. She briefly brings up Lala again, urging Arata not to feel bad, even if Lala already has someone else. When Arata questions how she found out about that, Minami easily explains that Uka gossiped about it earlier. To cheer him up, she starts listing his good traits, noting how dependable, athletic, and caring he is. Then, playfully, she pats him on the head and calls him senpai instead of big brother. When they arrive home, Minami heads straight for Uka and hands her a box of mini cakes, along with a pair of missing AirPods she had borrowed and forgotten to return. She apologizes sheepishly for the delay. To her surprise, Uka shrugs off the apology, tells her to keep the AirPods, and invites her to share the cakes together, an unspoken truce that softens the air between them. Arata starts his morning with the same routine he follows every day, going through the motions with a quiet familiarity. As he steps out of the bathroom, he catches sight of Kotono already dressed for school. She stiffens when she sees him, gives a quick, almost forced good morning, and hurries downstairs. He pauses in the hallway, watching her disappear around the corner. The awkwardness hangs heavy in the air, and he wonders if Kotono has finally come to terms with what he said in the bathroom a few nights ago. Maybe she understands that despite the truth about their adoption, things can't and shouldn't change between them. Or maybe she's just trying to avoid him. Either way, the shift unsettles him. Before he can think much more, Seiha appears by the corner and catches him in his daze. She asks if it's normal for adolescent boys to daydream so often. Arata greets her, but she quickly interrupts and insists that he add Chan to the end of her name. He hesitates, but realizing she won't let the issue go, he gives in. Please, Seiha immediately drops into a more casual tone. She brings up Kotono's behavior, noting that the tension between them hasn't gone away yet. Arata doesn't have time to respond before Minami bursts in, energy radiating off her like a sunbeam. She calls him Senpai again, clearly enjoying the nickname. Seiha raises a brow, questioning the choice of honorific, saying it's usually reserved for someone mature and respectable. Arata groans to himself as the girls head downstairs, wondering why his mornings are always filled with so much chaos. At school, Arata catches a glimpse of Lala at the lockers, chatting and laughing with a friend. As she walks off to class, he finds himself watching her go. His thoughts are interrupted when Uka suddenly appears behind him. She wastes no time teasing him and encourages him to confess to Lala. Arata shuts her down quickly, reminding her that Lala already has a boyfriend. Uka is visibly surprised by the revelation, admitting she hadn't heard anything about it. However, Uka quickly leaves him to join her group of friends. Their excitement spikes when she mentions her upcoming trip to the sea park for Kotono's birthday. From a distance, Arata observes her, reflecting on how effortlessly she blends into her social circle. He almost envies how naturally she attracts attention. A part of him wants to reveal her bratty side to the world, but he knows better. Crossing Uka would only make things worse for him. Some of Uka's friends eventually notice Arata nearby. They comment on how different his vibe is from Shiyun's, but still agree he's attractive. A few even whisper about wanting to date him. Embarrassed, Uka tries to list his annoying habits, but halfway through, she realizes she's accidentally praising him. Her ears turn red. Flustered, she rushes her friends off toward the classroom, mumbling something about the hallway being too hot. Finally, the weekend arrives and the family heads to the sea park. Uka is practically bouncing with excitement, taking in all the attractions with wide-eyed wonder. The With Me mascot strolls past them, and both she and Minami immediately rush over, laughing and playing with the costume character. Soon after, Minami's stomach growls, prompting Banri and Arata to volunteer to get food. They return a few minutes later, each carrying a tray of snacks, only to find the spot where their siblings were waiting now completely empty. Taking a seat on a nearby bench to rest and place the trays of food down, Arata pulls out his phone and begins calling each of his siblings. One by one, the calls go unanswered. Banri, noticing the lack of response, casually suggests that they enjoy the theme park together for now by going on a date, reasoning that they're bound to run into the others eventually. With the food already in front of them and no one else around to share it with, Arata ends up eating most of it himself. By the time they resume walking, he feels bloated and sluggish, regretting his decision. Banri walks beside him, noticeably more affectionate than usual. Despite being the eldest among the siblings, her demeanor borders on flirtatious. Her arm looping around his, her body pressed against his side without a care in the world. Arata, flustered by her sudden clinginess, tries to create space between them, muttering that they should be acting like a couple. Banri, however, casually brushes it off, reasoning that to outsiders, they probably don't even look like siblings. His mind drifts back to the sensation of her chest pressing against his elbow, a thought that lingers far too long in his head. Eventually, Banri catches on to his reaction and teases him lightly, causing Arata even more embarrassment. He manages to put a bit of distance between them as they continue walking. Banri, ever confident in her appearance, remarks how lucky he is to have such a beautiful older sister. Arata notices a few men giving Banri appreciative glances as they pass by, and he can't deny that she draws attention. She's well aware of it too and carries herself with the ease of someone used to being admired. They head toward one of the park's main attractions, a large roller coaster. Banri climbs up the stairs ahead while Arata follows a few steps behind. As she ascends, her skirt shifts with each movement, forcing Arata to avert his gaze. In his distraction, he trips and lands face first on the steps, making him feel embarrassed for falling in public. Banri, unfazed, helps him up and they continue on to board the ride. While Banri enjoys every twist and turn of the roller coaster, Arata becomes pale and shaken. He tries calling their siblings again with no luck. Finally, Shiyun sees the missed calls and sends a quick message before picking up his phone. Arata informs him of their location in the nature zone, prompting the rest of the group to realize they've gone in the complete opposite direction. Uka suspects what might have caused the separation, and Kotono, noticeably quiet, seems uneasy. The group agrees that the rest of the day should be spent focusing on Kotono, especially since the outing was meant to celebrate her birthday. Even without Arata and Banri, they decide to continue making the most of the day together. With that decision made, the rest of the siblings head toward the space coaster, an attraction Kotono has been wanting to ride since they arrived. The group agrees it's only right to prioritize her wishes for the remainder of the day. Meanwhile, Banri and Arata are resting at the far end of the park, seated on a shaded bench where many food stalls are lined up. Despite several attempts, there's still no word from the others. Banri eventually starts to feel hungry again and pulls a churro. She offers to split it with Arata, but he declines, still feeling queasy from having eaten too much earlier when they were waiting. As Arata watches Banri happily eat the churro, a quiet thought crosses his mind. He suspects that, like him, she must be affected by the recent news about their adoption. Curious, he cautiously brings it up. Banri pauses, then admits she was surprised at first, but doesn't want to let it weigh her down. She shares that, at some point, she plans to speak to their father and slowly ask about the details of their adoption, when the time feels right. She then shifts the conversation, sensing something in Arata's tone. He's been noticeably more withdrawn lately, and she worries about how he's coping. Arata doesn't mention what happened with Kotono or Seiha, But he does admit that the news left him uneasy. The fear that their bond as siblings might shift in strange, uncomfortable ways has been lingering in his mind every day. Banri notices his troubled expression and, without thinking, reaches out to pat his head in a comforting gesture. A memory comes to her, a time when Arata used to run to her crying after Uka picked on him. She had always been his safe place. Embarrassed, Arata quickly pushes her hand away, prompting Banri to sit back. She tells him sincerely that no matter what changes or revelations come their way, she'll always worry about him and the rest of their siblings. To her, they're a real family, one she protect at all costs. Hearing this, Arata is overcome with a sense of appreciation. He remembers how Banri had always looked out for him, especially when the others were harsh. That part of her had never changed, and it is what makes her his beloved older sister. As they prepare to get up and leave, a small girl running nearby suddenly stumbles. The 2 tall drinks she's holding slip from her tray, launching their contents toward Banri. Acting on instinct, Arata steps in front of her, taking the full brunt of the spill. The girl looks horrified and apologizes profusely. Arata waves it off, offering a friendly smile to reassure her. Banri looks him over, inspecting the soda stains on his clothes and grumbling that even washing them might not save the fabric. Then, without warning, Arata quietly declares that from now on, he'll protect her too. After all, that's what a younger brother is supposed to do for his older sister. The girl and her mother eventually bid Banri and Arata goodbye. Right at that moment, their siblings finally catch up with them, all of them wide-eyed at the sight of Arata, completely soaked from head to toe. Despite their curiosity, no one pushes for more answers, and they decide it's better to enjoy the rest of the park now that they're all together again. The group begins heading toward another attraction, chatting and laughing along the way. Arata and Banri naturally lag a little behind the others, walking at a slower pace. As they trail behind, Banri suddenly reaches for Arata's hand and takes it in hers. She gives a small smile and says that it's fine. After all, she's his older sister. As night falls, the amusement park transforms into something magical. The vibrant lights flicker to life, casting the entire area in a warm, dreamlike glow. Uka, clearly enjoying the scene, playfully pretends to be a princess, with Minami quickly volunteering to be her loyal prince. Arata soon feels the urge to use the restroom, and Shiyun offers to tag along. Kotono announces she'll join them too, saying she also needs a quick bathroom break. With the 3 gone, Seiha suddenly takes the opportunity to share something she's been holding in for a while. In a quiet voice, she recounts what she witnessed a few nights ago, an encounter between Arata and Kotono in the bathroom. Her revelation stuns the others, leaving Banri, Uka, and Minami in shock and concern. Seiha quickly reassures them, explaining that Arata had clearly rejected Kotono. In fact, she adds that she herself had tried to test him with a similar scenario to see if his heart might change, and thankfully, there was no change in his pace. Uka stares at her, stunned that Seiha went to such strange lengths to confirm Arata's feelings. Seiha insists it was necessary. She just wants to know how they should proceed, especially since Kotono's feelings don't seem to be going away anytime soon. They agree not to confront Kotono directly. Most of them still hope it's just a passing phase. However, Uka reveals that the incident in the bathroom wasn't Kotono's first attempt to confess. She reminds them of the time they caught Kotono and Arata alone in the game room. That had been her first confession. Banri begins to worry more deeply, her earlier hopes starting to waver. But she still wants to believe Kotono will eventually move on. Seiya challenges this, suggesting that Kotono's feelings might only grow stronger now that they all know they aren't blood-related. After a pause, Banri admits that she spoke with their father about their backgrounds. It turns out all of them are orphans adopted at different points. In Banri's case, there's no information at all about who her biological parents might be. She tells them not to do anything drastic for now. Arata is doing his best to reject Kotono, so it's best they simply keep a close eye on things and step in only if necessary. Just as the conversation ends, Arata, Shiyun, and Kotono return. The rest of the group quickly pretends they were just looking at the park map to choose the next ride. As the evening winds down and they finish the remaining attractions, they all head to the souvenir shop before making their way out. Minami and Seiha are determined to buy the With Me mascot doll, eager to add it to their rooms. Arata hangs back a little, choosing to walk a few steps behind the group. He observes Kotono and notices that she is back to her usual self. He thinks back to her birthday and how the news shocked all of them. He is sure that even their dad might be harboring worry that they would no longer act like siblings. But after today, he is sure that he can tell his father that they are still the same family. At a distance, fireworks go off and all of them look towards the sky in awe. When they reach the shop, the others eagerly browse, except for Arata, who lingers near the entrance. He freezes for a moment when he spots a girl who looks strikingly like Lala walking by. Uka notices and steps outside to join him. Uka teases him for having such boring hobbies, even joking that now that they're not really twins. Arata firmly says he'll always see her as his twin, but Uka tells him he'll need to start facing the truth eventually. Still, she admits it was fun being twins with him. Everyone believed it, especially since they were always in sync, even guessing each other's rock, paper, scissors moves. Then, without warning, Uka looks ahead and quietly confesses that she likes him. Before their trip to the amusement park, Arata confided in Shiyun. He admitted that recent events, especially involving Kotono, had left him confused and unsure of how to act around his sisters. Shiyun listened carefully before casually pointing out that, technically speaking, since none of them are blood-related, they're more like close childhood friends than actual siblings. He added that Arata was free to view them as potential love interests if he ever developed feelings for any of them. After a short pause, Shiun decided to confess that he had told Uka about the incident between Arata and Kotono. Arata's expression tightened, but Shiun was quick to explain that Uka didn't think poorly of him at all. In fact, she admired how he handled the situation. She even told him he was practically living a romantic comedy. If it were a story, people would be hooked on every twist. During the evening at the amusement park, Uka and Arata step outside for some fresh air. Without warning, Uka turns to him and says she likes him, but she quickly follows up, clarifying that it's her way of showing appreciation. She thanks him for being dependable, for handling Kotono's confession with grace and thoughtfulness. It's just a moment between twins, she claims, a bond built on trust. Relieved, Arata lets out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For a second, he really thought she was going to confess something romantic. Trying to lighten the mood, he deadpans that she's such a tsundere. Uka scoffs and rolls her eyes in mock offense. She mutters something about needing the bathroom. As she walks away, her expression falls. She frowns to herself, embarrassed. Even if she tried to pass it off as simple sibling affection, she feels like an idiot for letting those words slip. The next morning, Arata finds himself in the home's training room. He hopes a good workout will help clear his mind. As he stretches and warms up, Minami walks in for her usual routine. Arata greets her with enthusiasm, eager to help and be a dependable older brother, but Minami waves him off. She's still half asleep and tells him his energy is a bit much for this early in the day. Still, she smiles and compliments his diligence. Despite having no competitive goals, Arata sticks to his workout routine. He shrugs and tells her it's mostly for his health, that the physical effort helps calm his mind. Minami chuckles and recalls how strict their father used to be with Arata, often making him train late into the night. He says their dad's methods weren't exactly healthy, but adds that he admires Minami's steady discipline. As she watches him stretch, Minami's mind drifts back to the amusement park the night before. That evening, when the family realized Arata and Uka were missing, Minami volunteered to go look for them. She found them just outside the shop and was about to call out when she heard Uka say she loved Arata. She freezes. Conflicted, Minami quietly returns to the others without mentioning what she saw or heard. Now watching him again, his expression focused as he does stretches, those feelings start to bubble back up. Part of her wants to ask him directly to find out if Uka really did confess to him or if she simply misheard. But before she can say anything, Arata notices her inner turmoil and asks if anything is wrong. Minami quickly shakes her head and turns toward the weights, eager to start her routine so she won't have to answer his questions. In the middle of her workout, Minami eventually lets her curiosity win and decides to ask Arata if anything happened between him and Uka recently. Arata, slightly confused by the question, assumes Minami is just concerned about their usual spats. He reassures her that everything between him and Uka is fine and that arguments are just a normal part of their dynamic. Though Minami feigns relief, she feels slightly disappointed. She had hoped Arata would bring up Uka's confession or at least hint at a deeper bond. His casual response leaves her unsure if he truly doesn't see anything unusual or is intentionally avoiding the topic. Feeling a little awkward, she decides to cut her session short, announcing that she'll just continue her training in the afternoon instead. She quietly hopes Arata doesn't find her sudden shift in routine suspicious. Outside the training room, Minami sighs to herself, mentally berating her own vagueness. She knows she should have been clearer, but even then, she still lacks the courage to confront the truth directly. After his workout, Arata heads to the bathroom to clean up. As he slides open the door, he inadvertently walks in on Seiha, who is in the middle of removing her clothes. Quickly averting his gaze, he mutters an apology and steps back out. From inside, he hears Seiha casually comparing the moment to a familiar romantic comedy trope, which makes Arata groan under his breath. She tells him it shouldn't matter since they're siblings and continues undressing. Before he can fully close the door, he notices that a small piece of laundry is caught in the hinge. Sighing, he reopens it, picks up the clothing, and steps back inside to toss it into the laundry basket. As the sound of the shower running fills the room, Arata reflects on how unaffected Seiha seems by the recent news about their adoption. To her, blood relations have never seemed to matter much. Her behavior hasn't changed at all, and in some ways that consistency is comforting. Just before leaving the bathroom, he notices a familiar ring resting near the sink. Recognizing it as their mother's, he asks Seiha about it. She confirms that she's been wearing it recently, though it's still loose on her finger. So she removes it before bathing to avoid losing it. With the shower unavailable, Arata decides to head back to the training room to wait it out. Eventually, he gets his chance to clean up and later returns to his bedroom. A knock interrupts his thoughts and Banri's voice calls from the other side of the door, politely asking to come in. Banri steps into Arata's room and pauses, quietly impressed by how neat everything looks. She finds herself thinking back to when Arata was younger, a time when their father would often scold him for leaving snack wrappers or half-eaten food on the floor. Curious, Banri begins wandering around, not asking for permission but clearly comfortable enough to do as she pleases. She approaches his desk and spots his laptop sitting idle. As she leans in, a notification pops up on the screen. She reads aloud in a teasing voice, which makes Arata spin around in alarm. For a brief moment, he assumes Banri has somehow figured out his password and broken into the system, but then he realizes the notification was simply on the lock screen. It's been at least 2 years since Banri last visited his room, and her sudden interest now sets off quiet alarms in his head. He's about to ask what she's really after when she suddenly leans her back against him. Teasingly, she suggests they go on a date, her tone light and casual but laced with something deeper he can't quite place. Eventually, they stop in front of an department store and Banri grins, telling him this is a good chance to finally buy the smartphone he's been wanting. Arata, still trying to make sense of her mood, starts to think that maybe this day out with Banri is turning into something unexpectedly nice, until she casually mentions eating in Odaiba and booking a hotel for the night. The implications hit him like a cold breeze and he stumbles over his words, completely flustered. Banri simply laughs it off, saying she's joking and that maybe something like that is best saved for their next life. She steps ahead of him, clearly enjoying the moment. Arata trails behind, trying to shake off his confusion. Banri has always been a little eccentric, but lately her behavior has grown more tactile, more insistent, something he can't quite categorize. Inside the store, they're quickly approached by a cheerful sales lady. Arata is shown two models, an upgraded version of his current phone and another that's trending for its sleek design. Without hesitation, he chooses the upgraded model of his current phone. Banri leans in, commenting on how predictable he is and chides him for not even considering color options or trying something new. He tries to defend himself, explaining that he prioritizes functionality and familiarity over flashiness. Banri listens, then brings up a saying: how people choose their smartphones mirrors how they choose their romantic partners. Appearance versus performance. She remarks that while she respects his preference for inner qualities, there's a benefit to caring about appearance too. A beautiful partner, she claims, is easier to forgive during fights. Arata finds the logic shallow but bites back his retort, sensing the conversation is straying into dangerous territory. The sales lady returns with his chosen phone, but when she notices Banri next to Arata, she immediately assumes they're a couple and suggests they get a partner plan. Arata fumbles to correct her, but Banri wraps her arms around him tighter and plays along, and declaring that the couple plan sounds perfect. Flushed and panicked, Arata blurts out a refusal, insisting they won't be eating the plan. Banri and Arata eventually step out of the store and Banri pouts slightly as they walk, still disappointed about not getting the couple discount. Arata, on the other hand, feels a bit of relief. The idea of being mistaken for a couple with his sister is far too awkward, and he's glad to have dodged any assumptions. Banri's eyes light up the sight of an ice cream shop nearby. Before he can protest, she grabs his wrist and drags him toward the stall. Minutes later, they sit side by side on a bench, each holding a large cone stacked with 3 colorful scoops. Banri beams as she takes her first bite, her eyes twinkling with childlike joy. Arata, meanwhile, watches her in quiet amusement. Moments like this, when Banri drops her teasing exterior and simply enjoys something without pretense, are rare. Banri casually wonders if they should bring ice cream home for the rest of the family. Arata quickly shoots down the idea, reminding her that it would melt before they even got halfway back. She doesn't seem too disappointed, instead laughing as she recalls past family squabbles over ice cream. One memory stands out: Minami accidentally eating Kotono's portion. Luka had jumped in to scold Minami immediately, but Kotono, overwhelmed by the fuss, had quietly hidden herself in the closet until the tension died down. That habit of hers had earned her the nickname Closet Fairy. Arata takes the opportunity to point out Banri's own quirks, particularly her persistent fear of ghosts. At the mere mention, Banri freezes mid-bite, visibly trembling. Arata watches her shake and sigh, teasing that once she starts arguing, she never knows when to stop. The conversation eventually shifts. Banri, more serious now, asks how Arata's been lately, noting that he seemed down. Arata brushes it off with a self-deprecating joke, claiming his face just naturally looks sour. Banri is unconvinced, but chooses not to press further. Instead, she reminds him that she's his older sister and is always willing to listen. He doesn't respond directly, but is thankful for the assurance that she has his back. Back at home, Kotono lounges in her room, scrolling through photos from their recent amusement park trip. Each image brings a smile to her face until a new notification pops up on their sister group chat. It's a picture from Banri, she, and Arata eating ice cream together, seemingly close and cheerful. Kotono's smile falters, a quiet jealousy settles in her chest, but she doesn't let it show. She tries to type a reply, something lighthearted or supportive, but her fingers hesitate over the screen. Eventually, she gives up, saves the photo, and buries her emotions by returning to her studies. Meanwhile, Banri says she wants to explore a bit more, but after checking her phone for Kotono's response, she abruptly changes her mind and suggests they head home. Arata notices the sudden shift, but says nothing. His gaze falls on the necklace Banri wears, another piece of their late mother's jewelry. Almost without thinking, he tells her she should be going out with her boyfriend instead of wasting time with him. Banri's expression softens and a fond smile plays on her lips as she ruffles his hair affectionately before leaving ahead. Strangers pass her, many turning their heads to admire Banri's striking beauty. Arata, watching from behind, quietly reassures himself that he still values inner traits over outward appearances. Outside the mall, Banri makes a call to Minami, casually informing her that she spent the day with Arata and tried to gauge how he felt. But as far as she could tell, he still saw them all as just siblings. Minami, soaking in the bathtub, isn't satisfied. She still vividly remembers overhearing Uka's confession. Trying to let go of her doubts, she agrees with Banri and texts that she must have misheard. But in her distracted state, she accidentally sends the message to the entire sister group chat instead of replying privately. Panicking, Minami quickly recalls the message, hoping no one saw it. Just then, Uka knocks and enters the bathroom, annoyed at how long Minami has been in there. She catches a glimpse of Minami's flustered face, but decides not to press the issue and leaves. Minami lets out a sigh of relief, thinking she's safe. But across the hallway, Kotono sits quietly on her bed, her phone in hand dropped on the bed, eyes fixed on the recalled message she managed to read just in time. During a seemingly ordinary family dinner, the atmosphere around the table is light, filled with idle chatter and the clinking of dishes. But Arata's eyes linger on Seiha. She eats in silence, her expression unreadable yet clearly distant. While Seiha is usually quiet, she rarely looks this bothered. It's not the first time. Arata remembers seeing the same expression on her face the other day as they stood on the train platform. After the meal, while most of the family disperses, Arata finds Seiha alone in the common room, sitting elegantly. That same look settles on her face, pensive, heavy, contemplative. He walks past her, pauses, and tells himself to leave alone. But curiosity grips him. He doubles back and softly asks if something is on her mind. To his surprise, Seiha looks up. Her expression cracks a little, and instead of answering, she invites him to play Twister. While she sets out the playmat and gets the wheel, she decides to explain why she invited him to play. The other night, when she was in his room, she felt something strange. She doesn't like being uncertain, especially not with entrance exams coming up. She decides a round of Twister can test her theory. Arata is stunned. He reddens at the implication, but Seiha is already eager to start. She reassures him that there's nothing improper about it, she just needs to verify something. The adoption news hasn't changed anything between them, she insists. Their relationship is still their own to define. As Arata struggles to make sense of her reasoning, Seiha adds that if nothing else, he should do it to help her focus on her exams. She is his older sister after all. When she starts but still sees his hesitation, she reminds him that she had helped him study. So if anything, he should return the favor since his grades boosted so much with her aid. Cornered by her strangely logical yet utterly bizarre rationale, Arata agrees to play. He awkwardly places his foot to reach the colored circle nearest to him, doing everything he can to maintain space between them. Seiha frowns, clearly unimpressed by his caution, and accuses him of playing it too safe. He points out that he is still following the rules. On her turn, Seiha deliberately moves closer. She uses his own logic against him. The tension begins to build, but the game continues. For a moment, Arata starts to believe they'll get through it without ever actually touching. But Seiha has other plans. She shifts her strategy and positions herself directly in his path, contorting into an awkward and provocative pose. Arata is completely thrown off. Flustered, he declares he's surrendering. Seiha, still holding her difficult pose, glares at him. Of the two of them, he is in the easier position. If he quits now, he's basically admitting she is affecting him. Arata studies her more carefully and realizes she's actually struggling to hold the pose. It's not as effortless as she pretends. Instead of quitting, he decides to keep going. She calls his next move, right foot on the final blue circle, which unfortunately lies near her bottom. He swallows hard and shifts, carefully navigating his leg underneath her to reach the blue spot. Despite all his efforts to avoid it, his foot brushes against her bottom. He isn't sure of what he felt in that moment, but he manages to stay balanced, his foot planted firmly on the circle. After feeling Arata's foot brush against her, her thoughts quickly shift into something more clinical, almost automatic, as she begins listing the hormones associated with happiness: endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. She narrows it down to the last two, mentally filtering out the rest. Both dopamine and oxytocin relate to feelings of affection or attachment, which unsettles her. She spins the twister wheel, needing another move to confirm her theory. As the wheel spins, her thoughts drift deeper into the mechanics of human connection. The hormones are fleeting. They give people a momentary high, but they don't last forever. What matters more is trust, something stable and enduring. Trust is what relationships are built on once the novelty and excitement burn away. The wheel finally lands on green. She places her hand down, shifting into a new position that has her facing away from Arata. Unintentionally, the move leaves her in a pose that's still uncomfortably suggestive. Arata watches her silently. Her long string of analysis has taken on an oddly personal tone, one that makes him nervous. With every thought she shares aloud, it becomes clearer to him that she's trying to rationalize a way for them to be together. The tension in his body builds as he struggles to push back against the implications of her logic. Before he can think of a way to end it, Seiha's posture falters. Arata tenses, overwhelmed and annoyed. She could have fallen any other way. But Seiha stands up, mumbling something about being too tired to care where she landed. Arata tries to cling to his frustration, but his thoughts betray him, circling around the contact they just shared. Before he can process it further, Seiha begins packing up the game mat, her energy calm and collected. For her, the experiment is over. She is determined that whatever strange feeling she'd been experiencing was not rooted in anything real. With her clarity restored, she can focus on studying for her exams without further disruption. Before she leaves, she gives him a quiet thank you. Arata sits motionless for a moment, staring at the space she just vacated. He still doesn't understand the purpose of it all. The game, the hormones, the fall, it felt like something much larger was happening, and yet she dismissed it as if it were nothing. She's always been an odd one, mentioning inappropriate things with a straight face. He lets out a loud, frustrated scream into the quiet room. But before he can collect himself, Uka appears, catching him off guard. Her sudden arrival stuns him into silence. She looks around, asking if Seiha is with him, but he quickly denies it. Uka, unbothered by his vague answers, suggests they hang out for the rest of the evening. With nothing else to anchor himself, Arata accepts. They enter their gaming room with Arata's arm filled with snacks. Arata can't help but think back to their childhood. Uka had always been a sore loser. Anytime she lost a game, it would end with her tackling him to the ground in frustration. More recently, though, he's been thrown off by a memory even more awkward, the time he thought she confessed her feelings to him. Ever since then, being around her has felt strangely tense. When he walks into the gaming room, Uka is already on the couch mashing buttons, the game menu up and ready. Arata finds it odd that she invited him to play. Uka isn't exactly known for her gaming skills, and historically, she's been one of the worst at it. Still, she looks unusually determined. She urges him to hurry and join, and once they begin, Arata is stunned to lose 5 rounds in a row. Uka beams with confidence after each win, celebrating with a grin. For a moment, Arata relaxes, thinking maybe this really was just an innocent way to unwind. She seems genuinely happy, like the whole awkward tension from before never existed. He watches her closely. Uka had never been naturally gifted at much, but she worked hard, really hard, and now she was finally getting recognition both in academics and in sports. He remembers hearing from a few classmates that some of them had crushes on her, which surprises him less now than it used to. As they keep playing, Uka gets so absorbed in the game that she unconsciously leans against his legs from her spot on the floor. When she wins again, she smirks up at him, teasing him for getting rusty. Arata just smiles back. She really is as cute as his friends have said. He finally decides to take the match seriously. Soon enough, he catches up in points and eventually turns the tide. Uka's enthusiasm begins to wane as her losing streak continues, and she excuses herself to the bathroom. Except she doesn't go far. Circling behind him silently, she suddenly locks her arms around his neck in a chokehold. The move is chaotic and messy, with her unintentionally pressing against him from different angles as they wrestle. Fed up, Arata flips them over, ending up on top. Uka is momentarily stunned, eyes wide in surprise. Arata, equally shocked by his own reaction, freezes. He tells himself it's fine. She was the one getting physical first after all, but the moment still leaves him flustered. He weakly scolds her for being too rough. Uka, still catching her breath, stares up at him with a look that's impossible to read, and softly comments that he's definitely grown. Uka immediately stands up and leaves the room without another word. At the doorway, she pauses, her heart thudding heavily in her chest. Back in the room, Arata sits frozen, the weight of her final words hanging in the air. He turns the phrase over in his mind, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she only means it literally, acknowledging that he's finally strong enough to push back, unlike their childhood days when he simply endured her playful assaults without complaint. Still, something about her tone unsettles him. Feeling drained, Arata decides to call it a night. Unaware that the small cabinet door swings open in his absence, hidden inside the cramped space is Kotono, who has witnessed everything. The next day passes like any other. The family goes about their routines, school, club activities, homework. That evening, Arata finds himself in his father's study. They chat for a while before Kaname asks how the others are doing. Arata answers that things seem normal on the surface, but notes that everyone has been acting a little more animated than usual. He figures the news of their adoption is still stirring emotions beneath the surface. Kaname nods thoughtfully, and suddenly asks if Arata has a girl he likes. Elsewhere in the house, the girls lounge in the living room, watching a romantic drama. Just as the main character begins to confess his love, the screen cuts to black, ending the episode on a cliffhanger. Groans of frustration fill the room, and the conversation quickly shifts to romantic fantasies. The girls playfully describe their ideal confessions. Uka and Seiha voice surprisingly high standards, painting vivid scenarios of dramatic gestures and heartfelt speeches. Minami discourages Kotono from sharing, saying she doesn't need to worry about things like that yet. She's still in middle school, too young to fall in love. Uka shrugs at the drama's ending, calling it too cliché. Banri laughs, saying girls who act disinterested are usually the ones who fall the hardest. Eventually, they all agree with Minami's words. The setting, words, or timing doesn't matter as much as who makes the confession. The older girls get up first, gossiping about Shiyun and Yu's growing relationship as they leave the room. Kotono lingers behind, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sudden burst of determination, Kotono speaks up. She declares that she's in love with Arata. The girls fall silent. Banri tries to deflect it as childish crush talk, but Kotono doubles down, her voice unwavering. She means every word. From that day forward, she states plainly they're all now rivals for Arata's affection. Back in the study, Kaname steers the conversation back to love. He tells Arata that his future relationships are of great concern to him. After all, Arata is technically the eldest son with responsibilities. Curious, Arata asks why Kaname chose their mother. Kaname's first answer is blunt, her looks. While her beauty first drew him in, it was her calm strength, her unwavering spirit, and the quiet warmth she carried that made him fall deeply in love. Arata admits it's hard to picture. There's only one photo of her in the entire house. Kaname explains that she disliked having her photo taken. It was one of her many quirks, and to him, one of her charms. Then Kaname asks if Arata remembers the promise about room number 8. Arata nods. Kaname had once said he would show them the contents of that mysterious room when they were older. Before leaving, Arata expresses his admiration for Kaname despite all the secrecy. He promises that from here on, Kaname can rest easy. He'll take care of the household and ensure their family stays warm and loving. After Arata leaves, Kaname walks over to the framed photo of his wife. He gazes at it for a long moment, then softly whispers his pride in Arata. He's grateful to have adopted him. Years later, Arata stands outside, watching a young girl run through the yard. Her laughter echoes in the breeze as she eventually joins him. The girl then spots her mother and calls out to her. The mother's face remains unseen as she approaches her family. One morning, Arata wakes up early to get a head start on his job before school. Inside the house, his sisters are slightly troubled by Kotono's sudden confession. Minami decides to shelve her worries for now, choosing to head to school earlier than everyone else since the tennis competition is fast approaching. As she opens the front door, she sees Arata just returning from his jog. Unsure of how to act around him, she tries to excuse herself, which worries Arata. He stops her before she can walk away, telling her to calm down since the tennis competition is near. He wants her to perform well and is concerned that her distracted state may affect how she plays. She insists that she's fine and continues running towards school, hoping her worries are nothing. Inside, Banri is scolding the family dog for eating too much and refusing to exercise as Arata walks in. When they greet each other, Arata also scolds their Doberman for getting chubby. Banri suggests asking one of the servants to reduce the dog's food, but the dog blames Arata and proceeds to bite him. Soon, Shiyun joins them and notices that Banri still hasn't left for school. He assures her that he can make breakfast for himself, then turns his attention to Arata, who lies on the ground, exhausted from Vel's aggressive behavior. Meanwhile, Minami is already deep into practice with her club. The other girls notice how powerful she is on the court. She manages to keep her composure for the most part, but as Kotono's words resurface in her mind, she missteps slightly and hurts her foot. During a break, some of her clubmates shower her with compliments and ask for advice. However, Minami's explanations only confuse them. She isn't very good at explaining her techniques. Though the girls are puzzled, they still compliment Minami, saying she has a cute and perky side that no one would guess based on how she plays. From the corner of her eye, Minami spots Hinata and quickly challenges her to a game where the loser has to pay for drinks. As they play raclette, Minami easily wins and earns her drink. Sitting on the benches afterward, Hinata feels a bit sad that she'll be graduating soon, joking that Minami will no longer be able to leech free drinks from her. She then compliments Minami, admitting she was worried when Minami first joined the club. Although Minami is definitely overconfident, Hinata believes she's one of the most hardworking athletes on the team and deserves all the praise she receives. Hinata then looks into the distance and admits that she hopes Minami will make it big in her tennis career. Though it's painful for her to say it, she truthfully tells Minami that their school's tennis team is weak and has had to rely on her over the past year. Still, despite that hard truth, she has a good feeling that everyone will rise to the occasion in the upcoming competition. Minami gently smiles at her before teasing her about the sudden heartfelt speech. Hinata quickly gets flustered, waving her hands and trying to erase her own words from Minami's memory. The break soon ends, and as Minami warms up for the next round of practice, she overhears her clubmates gossiping nearby. They murmur that Hinata had failed to get into university through a tennis recommendation. With that path now closed, they say she might be forced to give up the sport entirely and start looking for a job instead. Minami freezes mid-stretch, staring at Hinata from a distance, a pang of sympathy forming in her chest. Memories begin to surface. Minami remembers her first day joining the tennis club. Hinata had been the first to greet her with a bright smile. They had played a few rounds of raclette, the quirky game Hinata had made up. Despite Hinata losing every match, she laughed off each loss, believing all the rumors about Minami's incredible skills. During one break between games, Minami had finally gathered the courage to ask what raclette even meant. Hinata had shrugged and simply said she liked Federer. Minami had giggled at the blunt honesty of her answer. Encouraged by the laughter, Hinata had gone on to say that someday she wanted to eat her favorite sweet while becoming the #1 tennis player in the world. Before Minami can dwell on the memory further, practice comes to a close. As she picks up her racket, she realizes with a growing sense of urgency that this will be Hinata's last competition. That thought alone steals her resolve. She has to give it her all, no matter what. That evening, one of the servants alerts Arata that Minami has been overworking herself. In the training room, Minami is pushing through her exercise routine, acutely aware of the dull ache in her foot. Still, she refuses to stop. The door creaks open. She glances over and sees Arata standing quietly by the entrance. He doesn't say a word at first. Instead, he steps closer, his expression unreadable. Finally, he breaks the silence. He offers to be her trainer. Minami blinks in confusion. She's always been the athlete in the family, and she already has experienced coaches. His offer makes no sense. Without looking away, Arata blurts out that he knows she's injured. Minami stiffens. At first, she refuses to face him, but then quickly turns and pretends to be full of energy, denying anything is wrong. Arata remains unimpressed. He levels her with a flat look, stating that she's terrible at lying. He knows when she's hiding something. He then explains that one of the servants saw her taping her ankle earlier and mentioned it out of concern. He wonders aloud if her injury is the reason behind her recent odd behavior. Minami stays silent. Though the injury plays a part, she knows the truth runs deeper, worries she can't bring herself to speak just yet. He implores Minami to get some help, or at the very least to have someone by her side during training, so she doesn't risk injuring herself further. Meanwhile, Uka is in her room, trying to relax, but her thoughts keep drifting elsewhere. Kotono's confession from the night before still lingers in her mind, fresh and unexpected. Minami and Banri had tried to downplay it, brushing it off as something spurred by too many romantic dramas. But Seiha had been quick to shut down that theory. Despite Kotono's youth, she might genuinely be serious about her feelings for Arata. Uka's thoughts wander back to the incident in the entertainment room. Her cheeks warm at the memory, her heart giving an involuntary skip. Back in the training room, Arata assists Minami through some slow stretches. It's his way of checking the severity of her injury without making it too obvious. Minami, however, is visibly restless. She groans and shifts, complaining that the stretches are boring and feel completely unhelpful. Arata casts a glance at her. Even as she fidgets, he notices how much she's changed. When they were kids, he and Minami were probably the closest among the siblings. They'd bonded over a shared love of games and working out. He used to admire her energy and resilience, and he still does. Despite being the most athletic among their sisters, Minami is also the slimmest and fairest of them all. Her beauty never fails to draw attention. Boys and girls alike are easily smitten by her. Arata tries to push that thought away, mentally scolding himself, and instead asks if she's told her team about the injury. Minami looks uneasy before admitting she hasn't. It's difficult, she explains. Everyone expects another stellar performance from her, and she doesn't want to worry them or shake their confidence. Arata starts to scold her, but Minami quickly cuts in, defending her decision. She says she knows the team's limitations. Even if someone else steps in to replace her, the performance might not be strong enough to win. Then, in a softer voice, she admits that there's someone she wants to win for this year. That, more than anything, pushes her to keep going despite the pain. From her spot on the mat, she tries to reassure Arata that the injury is manageable. As long as she monitors it and doesn't overdo things, it should heal in time. Seeing her sincerity, Arata relents, but not before warning her not to overexert herself. He also insists that she visit the hospital soon and get a proper assessment. If the injury turns out to be more serious than it seems, it could endanger her future in tennis. They switch places, and Minami helps Arata stretch this time. She quickly notices that he's stiffer than usual, struggling to reach his toes. With a smile, she gives him an encouraging push. Arata freezes, suddenly hyper-aware of the contact. He starts to turn confused and flustered, but when he looks at Minami, she appears completely unaware of what just happened, focused only on helping him stretch properly. Her expression is innocent, her actions sincere, and it leaves him too stunned to say anything at all. Finishing up their stretches, they say goodnight and part ways. As Arata walks down the hallway toward the bathroom, he spots Kotono standing a few steps ahead. Her expression is difficult to read, a mixture of desperation and embarrassment. It's the first time they've been alone together since the awkward incident in the bathroom, and Arata instantly feels the tension between them. However, Kotono had acted normal during meals or even at the amusement park, making him think she actually is okay. He realizes that compared to the others, he spent far less time with Kotono lately. Not knowing what to say or how to ease her discomfort, he walks past her but gently advises her to head to bed and warm up since the night air is getting colder. But then Kotono gathers her courage and quietly asks if he has just been with Minami. The question catches him off guard. He pauses, unsure of what she's getting at, before casually admitting that yes, he had just been with Minami, they were simply training. He then narrows his gaze and asks if something's bothering her, wondering if she's aware and worried about Minami's injury too. Kotono hastily denies any particular reason, stumbling over her words before excusing herself and hurrying back to her room. The day of the tennis competition arrives. Minami stands on the court, nerves and determination battling in her chest as the crowd cheers around her. Her mind flashes back to the relentless hours of training she had endured over the years. Tennis had never come easily to her. If not for Hinata, she might have hated the sport entirely. But Hinata had been her anchor, her inspiration, and today, Minami plays for her. She doesn't know how to express her gratitude, so instead she pours it all into her performance. With a powerful serve, she secures a win, earning her school a spot in the finals. Her teammates swarm her, celebrating the victory. When Hinata calls for everyone to return to the bus, she gives Minami a proud smile and thanks her for bringing the team this far. Minami beams in return, humbly crediting the entire team. The other girls agree that Sunday's final match will be their moment. As the group heads for the bus, Minami lingers behind. Her foot throbs painfully with every step, the injury flaring up now more than ever. Hinata notices Minami's strained gait, but says nothing, her expression unreadable. Later that evening, Minami returns home to a chorus of congratulations. She and Arata make their way to the training room for some light stretching to keep her foot in good condition. Minami eagerly tells Arata that her trainer has finally assessed her injury and promised to bring in someone more specialized to help with recovery. Arata feels relieved. It's a comfort knowing that Minami had listened to him and was now in proper hands. Satisfied, he leaves her to finish the rest of her routine and quietly returns to his room. There, he places the stretching guidebook he had been using for her back on the shelf. On the morning of the finals, Arata finds Banri at the dining table eating a bowl of cereal. She's barely dressed, and even though she's technically clothed, her underwear is clearly visible. As he begins eating, he notes that Banri's breakfast is unusually light. She explains it's part of a new diet plan. Arata assures her that she doesn't need to worry. She doesn't look overweight at all. Banri smirks, teasing that if she ever does gain weight, she'll count on Arata to help train her back into shape since he's the household's muscle man. Changing the subject, Arata asks where Minami is. With today being the big match, they both assume she must have already left. But when Seiya enters and mentions that Minami's tennis shoes and equipment are still untouched at the entrance, a wave of confusion and concern washes over them. When Uka and Kotono enter the dining room, they ask if they see Minami, but neither has. Even Shiyun is at a loss. It becomes clear Minami is nowhere to be found, and she's not at the match either. After searching the house from top to bottom, the family comes to a single, uneasy conclusion. Minami is nowhere to be found, and with her tennis gear still untouched by the entrance, it's unlikely she's gone to the competition. Anxiety spreads among them as they try to brainstorm where she might have gone. But before anyone can suggest a plan, the front door swings open and Minami steps in as if nothing is wrong. She greets everyone casually, holding a convenience store bag in one hand. Everyone stares at her in disbelief. She adds that supporters don't need to arrive super early, brushing off the confusion as she climbs the stairs. Moments later, her door shuts softly behind her. The family is left standing there, uncertain what to think. Even Shiyun, her biological twin, appears just as confused. If anyone could read Minami's moods, it would be him. Concerned, Arata decides to check on her. He quietly enters her room and is greeted by the sight of Minami lounging on her bed, eating chips and reading manga. She looks up and greets him cheerfully, completely at ease. Arata sits down beside her, trying to gauge if she's masking her emotions. He asks about the competition and her reason for staying home. Minami explains that Hinata had noticed she was struggling with her foot during the last match and told her to rest during the finals. Hinata was worried that continuing to let her play might make her injury worse and hurt her long-term tennis prospects. She says it all calmly, brushing off the disappointment. She even jokes that she probably would have lost anyway. Though she appears unbothered, Arata isn't convinced. He leaves her room quietly but pauses just outside her door, conflicted. Something doesn't feel right. That's when Shiyun finds him in the hallway and invites him into his room. Once inside, Shiyun shares something he's been keeping to himself. He saw Minami in the yard early that morning. She was crying, sobbing loudly over being taken off the player list. She even didn't approach her, knowing that Minami hates being seen vulnerable. He explains that she always puts up a front because she doesn't want people to worry about her. Hearing this, Arata doesn't hesitate. He storms back into Minami's room, grabs her hand, and drags her outside where the rest of the family is waiting by the van. Banri, though nervous, volunteers to drive despite her limited experience. With only 20 minutes left before the match starts, they have no other option but to race to the competition in the family van. Amid the chaotic energy of her family in the van, Minami is lost in thought. She remembers the conversation with her coach who had explained that she couldn't compete. Hinata had stood in front of her, gently encouraging her to rest, to think of the future. Initially, Minami refused to back down from the championship game. Despite her injury, she insisted on playing, confessing that she wanted to win for Hinata. It's because of Hinata that she rediscovered the joy of tennis. Her voice wavers, but her conviction is strong. This tournament means more to her than just a medal. Moved, Hinata rushes up and hugs her tightly, thanking her for the kind gesture. But gratitude alone isn't enough to change the decision. Minami is still benched, the risk of further injury deemed too great. Snapping her out of her memory, Arata speaks up. He reminds Minami that if she's truly going to go through with this, she has to promise to forfeit if her injury worsens. His voice is firm, not out of anger, but out of genuine concern. He adds that she needs to stop lying to herself and to them. She's not invincible and pretending to be won't help anyone. As the minutes pass, the championship has already started and Minami's team is at a disadvantage. Despite being so close to the sports stadium, the family van is trapped in traffic. The tension inside the vehicle builds quickly. They're losing precious minutes. Panic sets in as the realization hits. They might not make it in time. That's when they spot a row of rental bikes along the sidewalk. Seiha quickly reveals that she has an account, often using it for errands and shopping. Without hesitation, Arata borrows her phone, grabs Minami, and dashes to the bikes. Shiyun tosses Minami her tennis bag and shouts encouragement to Arata to deliver Minami on time for her game. Arata mounts the bike, Minami clinging to his back, and they speed toward the stadium. Inside the stadium, the doubles match concludes with a crushing loss for Minami's team. The two girls who just played walk off the court heads down, offering Hinata good luck for the singles match. The weight of the championship now rests on Hinata and one more teammate. Meanwhile, Arata pedals with every ounce of strength he has, determination burning in his legs. Minami clutches him tightly, feeling the wind rush past. She wonders aloud why everyone is going out of their way to help her. Arata doesn't answer right away. His breath is heavy, labored from the effort. But after a moment, he speaks. He reminds her of a particular Mother's Day years ago. Everyone else had written something sad about their mothers no longer being around, and Minami had written something different. In her note, she had said that even though their mother was gone, she was thankful that she and her siblings were growing closer. That positivity, Arata says, had stayed with him. He tells her that her optimism has always been a stronghold for their family. Since they were kids, she'd been the one to smile through the pain, the one to pick herself up every time she fell. She may not be the smartest, he admits, but she's the most hardworking person he knows. And he's always admired her for that. That's why he's helping her now. He hopes her dedication will finally pay off, but he makes her promise again to be cautious. This isn't just about tennis, it's about her future. Minami hugs him a little tighter, her voice soft as she promises to be careful. Back at the stadium, the solo matches are already underway. Hinata stands on the court, fighting with everything she has left. The pressure is immense, but she manages to secure a spectacular victory, pulling her team back into contention. With hope restored, the final and most critical match is left to the team's most nervous member. Minami rushes to the court, her heart racing with urgency. Her team is already assembled, and she's ready to drop to her knees if it means getting her spot back. But before she can speak, Arata steps forward and bows deeply on the ground in front of her teammates. The gesture is sudden and sincere. He pleads with them, begs Hinata and the coach to consider letting Minami play. He explains that she's promised to be careful, that she knows the risk, but she also desperately wants this chance. She's worked hard, and more than anything, she wants to win. Moved by her brother's actions, Minami bows as well, her voice steady as she repeats the request. This is all she's asking for, a single chance to stand on the court and fight. Hinata, watching the two of them, turns to the coach, echoing their request. The coach studies Minami carefully, eyes narrowing in thought. Finally, he allows Minami to play. The Shionji family arrives near the stadium. Arata steps away to call Banri, updating her on the news. As Minami steps onto the court, preparing to receive the serve, a sudden wave of anxiety washes over her. The weight of her teammates' hopes, her own expectations, and the lingering pain in her leg press down all at once. The pressure of victory is overwhelming. But then she hears it, Shiyun's voice, shouting her name from the sidelines. She glances over and sees her siblings waving, cheering with all their might. Her chest tightens, but this time with gratitude. She smiles, her nerves slowly settling. She catches Arata sitting a few rows away, watching quietly. Taking a deep breath, she steadies herself as her opponent serves. She moves without hesitation, her body light, driven by more than competition. This match isn't just for Hinata anymore. It's for everyone who stood by her, pushed her forward, and lifted her up. Despite the odds, Minami plays with fierce determination. She scores well, moving swiftly across the court, her strategy sharp. For a moment, it seems like she might actually win, but her stamina begins to falter and her opponent catches up. Eventually, Minami loses. At the bus waiting area, her team gathers with tears in their eyes. Hinata tries to console everyone, but Minami steps forward first, wiping her own eyes with a trembling hand. She forces a grin, attempting to lighten the mood with a goofy apology for the loss. But the act doesn't last, her mask slips. With her head bowed, she sincerely apologizes, blaming herself for letting the team down. She even tells Hinata to slap her for being foolish enough to insist on playing. Instead, Hinata approaches quietly and bows deeply to her. She thanks Minami for everything, for her talent, her heart, and her unwavering spirit. She says Minami is the light of the team, not just for her skill, but for the joy she brings in every game. Denying her the chance to play would have been the real mistake. The rest of the team watches the exchange with warm, tearful smiles. No one blames Minami. Her presence alone meant everything. Meanwhile, the Shionji family waits near the parking lot. There's talk that Minami might head back to school with her teammates, but no one is in a rush to leave. They agree to wait a little longer, just in case she needs them. In the van, the Shionji siblings discuss the aftermath of the game. Others, like Uka, are far more upset. She vents her frustration, placing blame on Minami's injury, the last-minute rush to the stadium, and even a decision to let her play at all. Meanwhile, Arata wanders off, leaving the noise of the van behind. After a few minutes of searching, he spots Minami sitting alone on a bench in the quiet, tree-lined part of the stadium. She looks distant, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the trees. Her posture is stiff, her shoulders hunched in exhaustion or resignation. As he approaches, he intends to remind her that everyone is waiting to go home and eat. But he pauses when he sees the faraway look in her eyes. She seems lost in thought, and when she finally acknowledges him, there's a tired smile on her face, the kind that clearly says she's holding back the weight of disappointment. Minami admits to herself that she is lost. She reflects on the effort it took for everyone to bring her here and feels the sting of having let them down. Her body still aches from the match, and the pain in her leg is a reminder of the odds she tried to defy. Though her teammates had thanked her, she can't shake the feeling that they should have been angry instead. Their kindness feels undeserved, and she would have preferred if they had scolded her. A sense of self-disgust begins to rise. She mocks herself silently, thinking that perhaps she's beginning to dislike who she is. So many people have said they admire her, and yet she believes she has only given them more reason to be disappointed. But then something shifts. She remembers how she almost didn't come, how she might have stayed in bed and missed the chance entirely. Gratitude takes over. She thanks Arata for forcing her up, for giving her the chance to compete, even if it ended in a loss. That at least was something she needed. Not playing would have left a deeper regret. She stands and begins walking, convincing herself to focus on something simpler, like the meat pies she believes are waiting for her at home. Before she gets far, Arata calls out to her and pulls her into an embrace. He holds her tightly, reminding her that she doesn't need to pretend, as she had promised to be more honest with her feelings, that it's okay to feel frustrated, that it's okay to cry. And so she finally breaks. Tears fall without restraint as she clings to him. She admits silently and bitterly how much she hates losing. It's a feeling she never wants to experience again. But uncertainty clouds her heart. She wonders if effort and practice will truly be enough to ensure she never has to feel this way again. Her sobs grow louder, her chest heaving with the weight of her feelings. Arata remains still, holding her through it all. He says nothing at first, but reassures her that she is growing, and she will get stronger with time. While showering one evening, Minami replays the moment when Arata bowed to her teammates, begging them to let her play. The memory clings to her thoughts, the weight of it heavier now that the emotions have settled. She also recalls how he had found her after the game, held her when she cried, and stayed with her until her tears had run dry. It was the most vulnerable she had ever felt, and yet, it had been Arata who stood beside her without judgment. It's hard for her to forget that. In the living room, the rest of the household lounges around, still winding down from the day. Uka, however, remains visibly upset. Days have passed since the competition, but the sting of the match still clings to her like an unshaken shadow. She voices her frustrations again, venting about the loss and how unfair the result had been. Arata, seated nearby, tries to reason with her. He tells her that the outcome of the game no longer matters. It's how Minami felt about playing that truly counts now. His comment only agitates Uka more. When Minami finally enters the room, Uka is quick to intercept her, attempting to convince her that she had actually won the match. But Minami quietly tells her that it no longer matters. She doesn't feel like the results define anything anymore. Uka bristles at the response, clearly not satisfied. Minami notices this and tries to explain herself. She reminds Uka that mistakes are part of every competition, and despite the rough battle, she feels grateful her injury didn't worsen. She got a chance to compete. That alone was enough for her. As the rest of the household begins to tease Uka for her overreaction, Minami takes a seat beside Arata. He asks her whether she managed to warm up properly during her bath, knowing the nights have grown chilly lately. His concern causes Minami to flush slightly, unprepared for the small kindness. Still not over the match, Uka announces she'll prove that Minami's shot was actually in bounds. She grabs Velzakil's ball and begins reenacting the scene. Velzakil, mistaking the demonstration for a game, dances around her, ready to pounce the moment the ball is thrown. In her frustration, Uka ends up flinging the ball toward Minami. Arata reacts instantly, catching it before it hits her and steadying Minami in case he had missed. Minami finds herself momentarily stunned by the contact, not used to feeling so protected, especially by him. But as the moment lingers, Minami starts to consider how the other girls have openly admitted liking Arata at one point or another. Maybe her feelings aren't so strange after all. She finds comfort in the idea that what she feels isn't odd or out of place. She smiles quietly to herself, reassured by the thought that her emotions are, in fact, completely normal. Later that night, Kotono is alone in her room, browsing her phone before settling down to sleep. Her mind suddenly drifts to her earlier confession from a few nights ago. She has spoken from the heart, but now questions why she had said such bold things out loud to people she holds dear. A knock interrupts her thoughts. When she opens the door, she finds Uka standing there. Uka asks if she can come in to talk. Unbeknownst to the rest of the household, the two are about to have a private confrontation. As Uka steps inside, she glances around and takes a brief moment to admire Kotono's room and how adorably it's decorated. Kotono, still puzzled, decides to ask what's on Uka's mind. Uka admits she wanted to talk about her declaration, when she claimed all the girls were her rivals for Arata's love. She explains that she wants to understand Kotono better. During the earlier confrontation, Kotono had looked cornered, and Uka admits she feels partly responsible. She wants Kotono to feel safe opening up to her so they can avoid further misunderstandings. Kotono listens quietly before interrupting her, her voice soft but steady. She says she already knows that Uka has feelings for Arata. Minami had accidentally shared a message once, revealing that she'd seen Uka confess to him. Kotono also confesses that she saw everything that happened between Uka and Arata in the game room the other day. Uka stiffens at the memory. Her cheeks flush red, mortified. She stammers, asking how Kotono even knew about that. Kotono, equally embarrassed, admits that she had been hiding in the closet at the time. Her face turns pink as she avoids Uka's gaze. Seeing the raw look in Kotono's eyes, Uka takes a breath and clarifies. She explains that at the amusement park, she did tell Arata that she loved him, but only in a sibling-like way, and that's likely all he sees her as too. As for what Kotono saw in the game room, she insists it was nothing more than an accident. Nothing romantic happened, despite how it may have looked. Kotono's eyes brighten at Uka's words. She asks again, hopeful, almost childlike, if Uka truly doesn't have romantic feelings for Arata. Uka hesitates just for a moment before confirming that she doesn't. Relief floods Kotono's face as she apologizes. She had jumped to conclusions and now feels guilty for misjudging Uka. Uka accepts the apology with a small smile, but her eyes remain distant. Once things are smoothed over, Uka quietly leaves the room. She thinks back to Arata's smile, the way it makes her chest tighten, and wonders if what she told Kotono was truly the full truth. Removing one of her hair ties, she heads toward the baths, needing time to be alone. A few days later, Banri is desperate to find a companion to go with her school at night. She asks Seiha and Uka if they can accompany her, but both refuse, citing other plans. Left with no choice, Banri waits anxiously for Kotono or Minami to come home. Instead, she spots Arata walking in through the door. Without wasting a second, she runs up to him, excitement in her voice as she asks for a favor. Before he knows it, Arata finds himself standing in front of Banri's college at night, with Banri at his side. They had snuck past the guards, since they weren't allowed inside at this hour, and he now questions the reason behind this sudden mission. He asks why she couldn't just ask her college friends. Banri grumbles that they were all busy and had refused. Arata follows her down the dimly lit hallways. As they walk, he finally understands the reason behind her insistence. Banri had left something important behind, and given the eerie silence of the place, it's clear that what truly stopped her from retrieving it alone was her fear of ghosts. The moment Banri hears the word ghost, a visible shudder runs through her. She recalls all the stories her classmates had shared, accounts of restless spirits wandering hospital halls and whispers echoing through empty classrooms. The more she heard, the more her anxiety built, and the idea of working night shifts during her internship became unbearable. As they continue walking through the eerily quiet school, Arata's curiosity gets the better of him. He wonders why she chose nursing if she couldn't handle the darker parts of the job. But when he asks, Banri doesn't respond. Her silence speaks volumes, and he decides not to press the matter. Instead, he moves forward ahead of her, determined to help find the item she came for so they can leave as soon as possible. Meanwhile, back at home, Uka struggles focusing on her studies. She decides to take a break by watching some videos on her phone, her attention immediately drawn to a mountain. Something about the image holds her gaze. Back in the college hallways, Banri's mirrors begin to unravel once again. The distant howl of wind brushing against the windows becomes a dreadful soundtrack to her growing fear. She unconsciously inches closer to Arata, clinging to his arm as though he were her lifeline. Her grip tightens with each step, making Arata visibly uncomfortable, though he refrains from pulling away too forcefully. When she quietly suggests they talk or sing to distract her, Arata is quick to hush her. They'd already taken a risk by sneaking into the school at night, and any unnecessary noise might get them caught. A sudden noise from down the hall forces Arata to act. He quickly covers Banri's mouth and pulls her into a dark corner, pressing them close to avoid being spotted. The security guard's footsteps echo nearby, but eventually fade away after the guard walks past them. Only once the coast is clear does Arata release her. Banri stands quickly, brushing off her clothes, cheeks tinged pink with embarrassment. Arata remains still, struck by the realization of how different Banri feels now compared to her childhood. The softness of her frame is definitely different from when they played as kids. Banri, on the other hand, pushes the moment away and urges him to move. They reach her club room at the end of the hallway, and she flicks the lights on without hesitation. The room is tidy and well-maintained, a stark contrast to the typical cluttered high school club rooms he's used to seeing. She walks straight to one of the shelves and retrieves a small, half-finished cat plush, its stitching still loose in places. It's clear that she's put a lot of care into it. This was what she had come for, something she couldn't bear to leave unfinished. Arata can't help but glance at the half-finished cat plush in Banri's hands. He wonders why she's gone through so much trouble for it, especially sneaking into the school this late at night. The doll, she says, is a gift for one of the children in the pediatric ward she's scheduled to visit. During a visit to the hospital where she's set to intern, she had noticed many children playing together, but a few stood off to the side, not engaging. Some were shy, others simply scared, adjusting to the sterile and unfamiliar environment. Older students from her school had brought toys, games, and warm smiles. Watching them gently coax laughter and joy from the children moved Banri. It gave her a sense of purpose. She wanted to be someone like that, someone who could bring comfort to a place filled with worry. Every child will receive a small gift, and Banri volunteered to make an extra so no one would feel left out. It's a simple gesture, but one that means the world to her. She admits that her dream has always been to make children smile. That dream, she says, stems from a memory buried deep in her childhood. Being the eldest, she often accompanied their father to the hospital to visit their mother. Those trips, though rare, were the brightest parts of her youth. But leaving the hospital was always painful. Sometimes she would stay behind and cry in a corner, overwhelmed by loneliness and fear. One day, a nurse found her, gently crouching beside her and offering soft words of comfort. That kindness left a lasting impression on Banri, planting the seed of her desire to become a nurse. As they walk toward the exit, Arata listens quietly. There's a softness in his gaze as he tells her she should have shared all of this earlier. There's nothing embarrassing about it. Banri, her cheeks slightly flushed, laughs away her hesitation, blaming on her nervousness over the plush. Then, with a playful glint in her eye, she reminds him of their awkward closeness earlier that evening, teasing that he got quite the experience. Caught off guard by her boldness, Arata quickens his pace, trying to ignore the heat rising to his face. Banri laughs and hurries to catch up, not wanting to be left behind in the darkened school. The next day, the pediatric ward is filled with the sound of children's laughter. They clutch the dolls Banri made, delighted by the gifts. Banri snaps a photo with the children and sends it to Arata with a short message of thanks. She wouldn't have finished in time without his help. Days later, Uka looks at her exam scores as the mock exam results are handed out. Her classmates swarm her desk, praising her and insisting she must have topped the scores again. Uka smiles and nods, keeping up the illusion. Once she's alone, she sits down and glances at her paper. A large D stares back at her. On Saturday morning, Arata spots her near the front door, carrying a large bag. He asks where she's headed. She plainly replies that she's going to Yamanashi and walks off. Arata is left standing there, surprised by her abruptness. But he tells himself she probably just needs a break. With all the tension that's been going on lately and Monday being a holiday, it makes sense that she'd want some time alone. He lets it go and carries on with his day, and the rest of the household does the same. But when Tuesday arrives and Uka still hasn't returned, a quiet unease begins to settle in. On Tuesday morning, Banri, Seiha, Minami, and Kotono stand on the train platform, waiting for the train to arrive. The group draws quiet attention. People notice something is off. The absence of Uka, usually the center of the group, is apparent. She had messaged them the evening before, informing her family that she wouldn't be returning to school just yet. But after that, there's been no further contact. The lack of communication makes the girls uneasy. With no other way to reach her, they're left to wait and worry. At school, Uka's classmates approach Arata during the break. They ask him if he knows anything about her sudden disappearance, concerned since Uka rarely misses class, much less without a clear reason. Arata admits that he doesn't know what's going on either. She hadn't said anything to him or the rest of the household. He tries not to show it, but the uncertainty gnaws at him. He wonders if Uka is hiding something from them. More than anything, he wishes she would just talk to them instead of shutting everyone out. Far from home, Uka relaxes in a hot spring. The steam rises around her as she leans back in the water, momentarily at peace. When she finishes, she walks toward the local train station. But once she arrives, she stops in her tracks. Instead of boarding, she turns around and heads back. Back at home, the rest of the group has gathered in the living room. Tension hangs in the air. Despite her promise to return on Tuesday, Uka hasn't contacted anyone all day. Seiha is the first to voice what the others are thinking. She finds the whole thing suspicious. Uka is normally the most cautious of them all, especially when it comes to her reputation. Staying away another day would only hurt the perfect image she's worked hard to build. Suddenly, Seiha snaps at Arata, frustrated that even he hasn't been able to reach Uka. Her sudden outburst shocks the others. Seiha, known for her calm and collected demeanor, rarely raises her voice. The room falls into silence until Banri hurries in, her phone in hand with a worried look on her face. She exclaims that she managed to track Uka's location. Her phone signal places her somewhere in Meifuji. The revelation sends a wave of panic through the girls. The first thought that crosses their minds is Aokigahara, the infamous forest near the mountain. Shiyun steps in, trying to calm everyone down before the worry spirals further. Banri tries to calm herself, but her concern is evident. Her attempts to remain composed fail as she becomes increasingly clumsy, revealing just how anxious she really is. Meanwhile, Arata stands alone, turning the situation over in his mind. Back in Yamanashi, Uka makes her way back up a quiet trail to the inn she had stayed at. The elderly woman running the inn spots her returning and approaches. Uka tells her she's decided to stay one more night. The woman, kindly and without question, assures her that there are still rooms available, even after she had checked out. Uka admits softly that there's something she wants to see in Mount Fuji. The innkeeper misinterprets her words, smiling warmly as she assumes Uka must be chasing the sunrise. Having reached his limit with Uka's prolonged absence and silence, Harada makes a firm decision. He quickly gathers his things and announces to the rest of the household that he's heading to Mount Fuji. He intends to bring Uka back, hopefully in time for school tomorrow. Banri tries to stop him, but before she can convince him, Seiha steps forward, her expression serious, and tells him to bring Uka home for them. With no further argument, Arata boards a bus and begins the long ride toward the mountain. He eventually reaches the 5th station, at the closest drop-off point of the express bus before climbing begins. From there, the trail to Mount Fuji stretches ahead. He immediately calls Banri to check Uka's GPS location. Banri, already glued to her phone all day, confirms that the signal hasn't moved. It's still in the same area, but it isn't in any residential zone or on a main road. It's somewhere tucked away off the map. Hearing that, Arata comes to a conclusion that Uka must be staying at a remote lodge or inn on the mountain itself. Without hesitation, he starts the climb. As he walks the trail, the cold air nipping at his face, Arata can't help but worry. He still doesn't understand why she came here. Back home, Minami scrolls through her phone, checking the distance from their area to Mount Fuji. The distance only deepens her concern. She heads to the kitchen for a drink, needing a break from her thoughts. Kotono soon follows and finds her. Quietly, Kotono opens up about her fears about Uka, but also about Arata chasing after her alone. Minami offers her a reassuring smile and tells Kotono that Arata is physically capable of making the climb without harm. Meanwhile, Arata finally arrives at the inn tucked into the mountain slope. He opens the door and is met with a surprised expression, but Arata simply shrugs and greets her as if he had just gone out for a walk. Uka, not amused, demands answers. Arata simply answers that he is here to find her, then turns to the innkeeper to say he'll be staying the night. Since he had claimed earlier that he was Uka's brother, the innkeeper had naturally arranged for them to share a room. Once in the room, Arata realizes his mistake. They sit awkwardly at opposite sides of the 2 futons positioned next to each other, alone for the first time since the game room incident. His thoughts are cut off when Uka suddenly speaks, instructing him to keep his head turned so she can change. Arata stiffens and stays exactly where he is, eyes fixed straight ahead. After a moment, Uka announces she's finished. He cautiously turns his head, only to find her already under the covers, still facing the opposite direction. Arata moves to turn off the light, settling into the futon as the room dims around them. He mentions that they'll be going home tomorrow, reminding Uka that her absence is hurting her chances of winning the student council president election. Uka, still turned away from him, doesn't budge. Accepting her silence, Arata turns to face the opposite direction, trying to settle down for the night. After a long pause, Uka finally speaks up, asking if everyone back home is worried. Arata confirms it, mentioning Banri's especially strange behavior. She had even begun talking to a pasatong as if it were Uka. The quiet stretches again before Uka begins to speak, her voice softer now. She recalls how their parents first met, strangers on Mount Fuji, brought together by circumstance. Their mother had nearly collapsed from altitude sickness, and their father had offered to help her down the mountain. As a child, Uka had adored that story. To her, it had been proof that destined partners existed. 2 people fated to meet even in the unlikeliest of places. She then wonders aloud if he believes in the idea of destined partners, people whose lives are bound from birth. Her voice carries a hint of hesitation when she muses whether any of them, who were raised under the same roof, might be destined partners too. Arata sits up, startled by the suggestion. The idea is absurd, even uncomfortable, but Uka calmly explains her reasoning. She can't understand Kotono's feelings for him. This was the only explanation that made sense to her. After a moment, Arata lays back down. He asks if Uka had come to Mount Fuji in search of her destined partner, but she doesn't answer. When he turns to check on her, he finds her asleep, her breathing steady, soft snores breaking the silence. He stares at her back for a while longer. Despite not fully grasping her actions, he senses that something must have weighed heavily on her heart. Uka was always composed, always in control. For her to make such a spontaneous and uncharacteristic trip, it had to be serious. Gently, he pulls her blanket up, covering the part of her shoulder that had slipped free. It's cold, and she might catch a chill. Morning comes. Arata wakes slowly and turns to Uka's side, ready to tell her it's time to go home. But the futon is empty. In Uka's place, a note is left, stating that Uka had already gone on home ahead. Arata sighs, frustrated. He knows she's lying. At that moment, Uka is climbing further up the mountain slopes. The air grows thinner, rain soaking her clothes, but she keeps going. Arata calls Banri, admitting that he's lost track of her. Banri checks Uka's GPS. The location hasn't changed much, still somewhere on Mount Fuji, confirming Arata's growing suspicion that Uka had never intended on going home. Arata decides to make his way to the top of Mount Fuji, hoping to find Uka there. Meanwhile, mountain officers begin to take notice of Uka's constant presence in the same area for several days. They note that she's been hiking up to the summit and staying there for hours each day, an unusual pattern since most climbers only go up once before descending. As the weather begins to worsen, several climbers begin descending the mountain. Uka, watching them leave, decides it's time for her to descend as well. A dull sense of disappointment grows in her chest as she turns from the summit, her footsteps heavy. She starts scolding herself for her choices, unsure of what she had hoped to find up here. Caught up in her thoughts, she doesn't notice how thick the fog has become until the trail ahead is barely visible. Arata waits along the trail between the summit and the 5th station. Based on the time, Uka should have passed by already, but there's still no sign of her. The thickening fog makes visibility difficult, and Arata's concern only grows. Uka, now fully aware that she's lost, begins scanning her surroundings for any familiar landmarks. Rather than risk getting more lost by turning around, she chooses to move forward, hoping it will lead her back to the trail. As she raises her voice to call out, she missteps and suddenly slips, tumbling down a slope. When she finally lands, she finds herself far below the path, surrounded by rocks and uneven ground. She tries to stand, but pain shoots through her leg. Looking down, she realizes she's injured from the fall. There's no trail nearby, and from her current location, it's unlikely anyone will find her. Meanwhile, Arata returns to the inn after failing to spot her at the summit. He assumes Uka might have gone back ahead of him, but upon checking, the innkeeper tells him she hasn't returned. Realizing something is wrong, Arata calls Banri and asks her to check if Uka is still in Mount Fuji. Banri responds that Uka's phone is no longer in coverage, which confirms Arata's fear. Something must have happened to her on her way down. When Uka was younger, shortly after their mother's death, their father gave her a pair of earrings that once belonged to their mother. She had turned them into hair ties so she could wear them every day. After fixing them in her hair, she asked her father how he had met their mother. Kaname told her that he met her on Mount Fuji. She had nearly collapsed from altitude sickness, and he helped her descend the mountain. Uka had listened to the story intently. To her, Kaname had sounded like a prince in a fairy tale. He had patted her head and said that someday she too would meet her destined partner. Uka jolts awake from the memory. The drizzle from earlier has become a heavy downpour. She's cold and hungry, having rushed out earlier that morning to avoid being dragged home by Arata. She fumbles for her power bank, only to find it nearly empty. Panic starts to creep in. If no one finds her soon, she might not make it. She starts thinking back to the moment when her father told them the truth, that her siblings weren't her blood siblings. She wonders if Arata had noticed she was gone, and if he had tried to look for her. She scolds herself for everything, how she keeps causing trouble, how she feels like a burden. Her eyes fall on the small hair accessory in her hand. In her weakened state, she drops it. Frantically, she searches through the mist for it, barely able to see. Then a glimmer catches her eye, a reflection from the accessory. She realizes the shine is from a light source. She looks up the slope and finds Arata standing there, his expression unamused. He simply says he's found her. Suddenly, Uka imagines how her father must have looked the day he met her mother on this very mountain. When Uka was a child, on a bright winter morning, she had rushed home, excited to share her day with her father. Bursting with energy, she had eagerly tried to talk to him, only for Kaname to gently turn her down, explaining that he was still busy with work. He promised, though, that once his tasks were finished, he would make time just for her, so he could listen properly. True to his word, once work was done, he joined her for tea and snacks. Uka had beamed with joy as she talked about every little thing that had happened, her father smiling quietly as he listened. In more recent years, that memory had begun to sting. Standing outside her father's study one evening, Uka hesitated. The warmth they used to share now felt distant. She stood there for a long moment, wondering if it would be as easy to open up to him as it once was. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Kaname was there, surprised to see her. He took one look at her troubled expression and asked if something was wrong, if she wanted to talk. But Uka shook her head. She decided against confiding in him, choosing instead to carry her problems alone, choosing to go to Mount Fuji. When Arata finally appears in front of her, Uka is stunned. Even more so when he manages to reach her location on the steep slope. She tries to stand, but her leg gives way immediately, and she collapses again with a wince. Arata approaches without panic, kneels beside her, and gently checks her injury. Realizing she can't walk, he crouches down and tells her to get on. He'll carry her. Uka stubbornly refuses at first, embarrassed and flustered, but Arata calmly reminds her that she's in no condition to argue, especially not with an injured leg in worsening weather. Reluctantly, she gives in and climbs onto his back. He stands, adjusting her weight, and begins walking. Rather than descend blindly into the fog, he decides to head up first to reach a clearer path and avoid getting lost again. The air is thin, the fog thick, and Uka isn't exactly light, but he doesn't complain. Step by step, he pushes forward, focused only on getting her back safely. Back at home, Banri is beginning to panic. Arata hasn't sent any updates, and now his phone can't be reached either. Saiha, monitoring the weather, notes that conditions around Mount Fuji are getting worse. Kaname is already making arrangements to return to Japan, deeply worried. Shiun, Minami, and Kotono have gone back to school, hoping and praying that both Uka and Arata are safe. Eventually, Arata lets out a quiet breath of relief when they reach the hiking trail again. But the relief is short-lived. The rain is pouring hard now, and the trail has turned into mud. Every step is a challenge, one misstep away from disaster. At one point, he nearly slips but catches himself just in time. Feeling the strain in his breathing, Uka finally speaks. She tells him the truth of why she had decided to go to Mount Fuji. She had seen a trending video. It claimed that if you brought a personal belonging from a deceased relative up the mountain, you'd be able to see them again. She had brought her mother's jewelry, those earrings she had worn as hair clips. She had come hoping to see her mother, to say something she hadn't been able to before. Arata listens quietly and gently asks if she saw her. Uka doesn't respond at first. Then, in a bitter voice, she starts ridiculing herself for even believing that their mother would come to her when they didn't even share any blood relation. Uka bitterly admits that the news about their family not being real has broken her. The closeness she once shared with her father now feels fake, like a story she had made up in her head. Where there used to be comfort, there is now hesitation. She no longer feels safe opening up to him the way she used to. She feels trapped as her emotions twist and tangle inside her with no outlet. These thoughts aren't things she can simply tell her friends about either. The strain had started to show. She found it harder to focus, and her grades dropped drastically since that evening. The warmth in their household feels distant. Everyone still tries to act as if nothing has changed, but the distance is evident. Arata listens to her quiet confession. He sighs and asks if he's the only one who still sees them as twins. To him, their bond isn't about blood. They were raised together and lived as siblings, and that doesn't simply disappear with the revelation. She still matters to him, just as much as ever. He pleads with her to rely on him more, like before. He promises that no matter what happens, she can always count on him to be there. She doesn't have to carry everything alone. At his words, something inside her loosens. The pressure she's been holding back finally slips, and she breaks down on his back, her face pressed against his shoulder, letting herself cry for the first time in a while. They eventually reach the inn. Uka gets patched up, and after thanking the innkeeper for her help, they begin making their way toward the 5th station to catch the next bus back home. The rain is let up, and they playfully argue as they walk down the path, but are soon interrupted by a familiar voice calling out. Looking ahead, they see their family waiting at the bus stop. Arata had stopped replying, and out of concern, they had come searching. Banri had driven 4 hours straight just to get there. Banri immediately fusses over both of them, noticing Uka's bandaged leg and Arata's chilled skin. Seiha mentions that coming had been Minami's idea, which surprises everyone. She had seemed the most confident they'd return safely. But even she admits that the longer they were gone, the more anxious she became. They pile into the car without wasting time. On the drive, Minami teases Banri's slow driving while Seiya curiously asks Uka why she went to Mount Fuji in the first place. Uka tries to dodge the question, saying she just wanted to visit the place where their parents met. Seiya pushes for more, but Banri steps in to change the subject, only to nearly rear-end the car ahead. Minami quickly shifts the mood, suggesting that next time they should all go to Mount Fuji together. Uka lets her gaze drift to the passing scenery. She realizes how thoughtful her family truly is. The moment she chose not to share her real reason, both Banri and Minami had made sure no one pressed her further. Suddenly, Arata's head drops onto Uka's shoulder. The fatigue from the trip finally catches up to him, and he falls asleep beside her. Uka instinctively reaches out to wake him, but stops when a memory from their childhood comes to mind. She remembers lecturing Arata about how a man's shoulder is meant for a woman to lean on. She had insisted on this point with confidence, citing how their father had once saved their mother. Arata had argued back, claiming that relationships should be equal, and that their father probably relied on their mother in many ways too. But Uka had stood by her opinion, saying that their mother just wanted to spoil her husband because he had always been a great man to her. Uka lowers her hand and lets Arata sleep, deciding not to wake him after all. She allows him to rest the entire way, her heart quietly thudding from the closeness between them. Eventually, they arrive back home. Everyone but Banri, Arata, and Uka exits the car, commenting on how late it's gotten. Uka tries again to wake Arata, but he doesn't respond. Panic begins to rise in her voice as she calls the others over. When she touches him, she realizes he's grown warm. Shiun quickly carries Arata to his room and assures the others that he'll watch over him and take care of the fever so it doesn't get worse. Just then, Kaname arrives. His eyes immediately fall to Uka's bandaged leg, but she quickly reassures him, explaining that Arata is in worse condition than she is. Kaname learns what happened, that it was Arata who had saved Uka, even carrying her down the mountain in the rain. He heads up to check on Arata, quietly inspecting him. Though Arata's face is flushed, Kaname concludes that the fever can be handled at home. He tells the rest of the family to rest and not to worry. Later that night, Kaname retreats to his study. He pulls out an old photo album and flips through it in silence, eventually stopping at a photo of himself and Uka when she was much younger. His gaze lingers on it longer than the others. A soft knock sounds on the door. He opens it to find Uka standing there, clearly nervous. She admits she's been wanting to talk to him for a while. Her voice shakes as she confesses that learning they weren't blood-related had left her feeling betrayed. She had been avoiding him, unsure how to speak to him now that the closeness they once shared feels distant and uncertain. But she also says that someone, without mentioning Arata by name, helped her realize that family isn't just about blood. She still sees him as her father and still loves him as one. From now on, she promises to talk to him just like before. She steps forward and hugs him. Kaname wraps his arms around her without hesitation, holding her close as he thanks her for letting him in again. The next day, Uka returns to school using crutches. Her friends quickly gather around her, concerned. She explains with a calm smile that she fell while visiting a relative's place. One of them mentions that now that Uka is back, Arata is the one absent from school. The comment makes another girl frown in quiet concern. Later that evening, Arata's fever hasn't broken yet. He remains in his room, resting under thick blankets. Banri prepares a bowl of porridge for him, and both Minami and Kotono offer to take it up. Banri glances between the two and gently hands the bowl to Minami, whispering that they can't let Kotono be alone with Arata, not after her last outburst. Meanwhile, Seiha walks into the kitchen and tells Banri that Arata's fever is slowly going down. Luka, who's nearby, asks how she knows, and Seiha pulls out an ear thermometer in response. With a small sigh, Seiha tells Uka that since Arata got sick from saving her, it should really be Uka taking care of him. But Uka stubbornly shakes her head and turns away, saying she'll leave him alone so he can rest properly. She heads to the bath instead, letting her mind drift as the hot water soaks away some of her stress. After she finishes, she steps out and informs her sisters. Minami immediately claims the next turn and playfully invites Kotono to join her. Kotono hesitates, flustered by the sudden suggestion, and the sisters burst into teasing laughter. Quietly, Uka slips away from the noise and walks to Arata's room. She peeks in and sees him sleeping. Without a word, she tiptoes to his bedside. In a soft whisper, she thanks him. Her voice trembles as she admits how grateful she is that it was Arata who found her. She apologizes for not telling him everything, confessing that she had gone to Mount Fuji because she wanted to see their mother and because she needed to sort out her growing feelings for him. She tells him gently that even though they are family, she also likes him. Downstairs, the rest of the household sits in the living room. They finally start discussing Uka's trip. Seiga doesn't buy Uka's original excuse, but says they probably don't have the right to press her any further. Kotono, with innocent curiosity, says maybe Uka just wanted to fly a kite from the highest point in Japan. Everyone gives her a puzzled look. Back in Arata's room, Uka leans in. She places a gentle kiss on his lips, her expression unreadable. Arata stays still, his breathing steady as if asleep. No one questions Uka's long stay in Arata's room. They continue their night as usual. Eventually, Uka stands, collects the empty bowl, and whispers a quiet sorry before leaving. The door closes softly behind her, and once Arata is sure she's gone, Arata opens his eyes. His face is bright red, not just from the fever. He stares up at the ceiling, heart racing, wondering what could have caused Uka to do that. During a school break, a Shiunji family decides to spend their vacation at their villa in Karuizawa. Arata remembers that the last time they visited the area was 3 years ago. When they were much younger, their dad would often bring them to the villa. The trip stopped as they got older. As they inspect the villa, they notice that almost nothing has changed. It seems much smaller now compared to how it felt back then. Arata recalls how they all used to share the same room when they were kids. Banri sneaks up behind him and grabs his arm, playfully suggesting that they sleep next to each other. Arata drives her away and turns his attention to Uka when he hears her voice. The memory of the kiss suddenly flashes in his mind and his face turns red. He tries to clear his head, still having difficulty comprehending the event and wondering if it had only been a fever dream. From a distance, Uka notices his troubled expression and decides to join him on the upper balcony. When Arata refuses to say what's bothering him, Uka says she can tell something's wrong since they were raised as twins. But Arata's eyes drift to her lips, making him embarrassed. He quickly insists again that nothing's wrong before walking away. Meanwhile, Shiyun wanders around town and finds that the address given to him is actually an empty plot of land. Back at the villa, the rest of the family busies themselves with unpacking and settling in. Arata tries to wash away his thoughts with a shower, but doesn't help. He figures that Uka probably doesn't feel awkward about the kiss, since she must have thought he had been asleep when it happened. He resolves to forget the whole thing so they can return to normal. Just then, the door opens and to his surprise, Shiyun walks in. Arata asks how he got in, and Shiyun casually mentions that the door isn't even locked. Arata realizes just how distracted he's been ever since the kiss. Pushing aside his embarrassment, he asks where Shiyun has been since he walked off alone right after they arrived at the villa. She even admits that he had gone to see if he could find his parents since he had recently learned they were supposed to be in the area. However, when he went to the address, all he found was an empty lot. He confesses that coming to Karuizawa had been his idea because he wanted to look for his real family, for both his own sake and Minami's. Then he asks Arata if he ever feels the urge to meet his real parents. Arata admits that he does want to see them eventually, but he's in no rush because to him, his current family is his real one. Shiyun smiles at that, comforted by the thought. The disappointment he felt from not finding his parents fades as Arata's words sink in. He tosses a towel at Arata and steps out, giving him back his privacy. When Arata heads toward the living area, his eyes drift to Uka standing by the balcony. Minami and Kotono both catch the embarrassed expression that crosses his face the moment he sees her. Later, Banri grills several pieces of meat and vegetables for everyone, promising a better barbecue when they head to the river. Buga asks Shiyun what he's been up to, and the conversation naturally shifts to his relationship with Yu, which makes Arata feel flustered just listening. Kotono walks over and hands Arata a plate of food, and he thanks her gratefully. They eventually realize that Minami is missing, but it turns out she's just in her room rummaging through the things she packed. After some digging, she finally finds what she is looking for, and a look of quiet determination appears on her face. The next day, most of the family is still fast asleep in their beds. Uka gets up early and notices that Arata's futon has already been packed away. Arata is already outside, spending the morning inside the outdoor sauna tent. His thoughts drift to his talk with Shiyun. He wonders if the others have also started looking for their real parents, and considers whether he should do something to help them. But before he can dwell on it further, the memory of Uka's confession suddenly floods his mind, and he bolts out of the tent in a panic. He hears Uka's voice call out to him. She casually admits that she's been watching him since early morning, which only makes Arata more nervous since he still hasn't figured out how to act around her. Instead of sitting beside her, he walks over and takes a seat on the steps near where she's been lounging. Before they left for the trip, he had noticed that Uka had been making small efforts to grow closer to him, inviting him to games, showing him funny videos, always finding ways to spend time with him. Noticing his troubled expression, Uka walks up and grabs his arm, playfully inviting him back into the sauna for an endurance match like they used to do as kids. Arata immediately refuses, not wanting to be alone with her in such a closed space. He suggests she just use it on her own. But Uka simply sits down next to him, saying that if he's not going in, then she'll stay outside with him. Feeling her presence so close, Arata's mind begins to spiral. Though he originally wanted to leave the awkward moment behind, he ended up accepting her challenge instead. The moment he steps into the sauna tent with her, he realizes his mistake and mentally scolds himself. Uka, however, seems completely at ease, happily chatting about how she always won their childhood endurance contests. Arata tries to keep his eyes elsewhere, but every time he glances at her, he remembers the kiss. No matter how hard he tries, his gaze keeps drifting back to her as she continues to talk, full of nostalgic energy. As his gaze lingers on Uka a little longer, Arata scolds himself for having such thoughts about her, convincing himself that it's not proper. His inner conflict is suddenly interrupted when Uka asks if he's planning on getting a girlfriend anytime soon. Caught off guard, Arata finds it difficult to answer. He suspects it might be some kind of trap, so he tries to play it safe by saying he hasn't thought about getting into a relationship just yet. When Uka reacts with what seems like disinterest, he starts to panic, wondering what exactly she's trying to find out. Meanwhile, Minami is the next one to wake up. She notices that both Uka and Arata are already gone from their beds. Back outside, Arata and Uka wrap up their endurance match in the sauna tent, with Uka emerging as the clear winner, seemingly unfazed by the heat. Arata, on the other hand, kneels outside the tent breathing heavily, feeling both physically drained and mentally overwhelmed by everything running through his head. Uka returns to the steps and sits down, looking at him with slight concern. She then asks how he feels about Lala, reminding him that the last time she checked, Lala was the girl he had a serious crush on. An image of Lala and her boyfriend flashes in Arata's mind. He admits that he has already let go of his feelings for her, knowing she's with someone else. He doesn't want to hold on to something that was never going to happen. Uka's eyes brighten, and she suddenly announces she's heading back inside for a shower. Arata watches her walk away, feeling slightly disappointed that he wasn't able to properly confront her, but consoles himself with the fact that she seems happy anyway. While showering, Uka lightly scolds herself for being too obvious with her feelings. Her thoughts drifted to their childhood when they would often use the sauna tent to talk for hours. She remembers one particular moment when Arata had said that having her in his life was enough for him and that he didn't need a relationship to feel happy. She wonders if maybe she had always liked him, even as a child, but being raised as twins made her suppress those feelings. Arata sits alone on one of the balcony chairs, thinking about everything that's happened. He wonders if he should handle the situation the same way he did with Kotono's confession. But the more he thinks about it, the more he realizes how different it feels. Unlike Kotono, Arata finds himself truly attracted to Uka. Suddenly, Minami arrives and asks Arata to join her later since there's somewhere she wants to go while they're in Karuizawa. Later that day, Arata finds himself standing in the middle of a public flower garden, feeling slightly confused. The location feels like an odd choice for Minami. He had always seen her as more athletic and less interested in girly things. Honestly, he'd expected her to bring him to a tennis court, not a flower garden. He finally questions Minami about it, and she responds a bit nervously, claiming that there are days when she just wants to admire something beautiful. She hides her face by stepping toward a flower bush, and that's when Arata notices that Minami is wearing a skirt. It takes him by surprise. It's rare to see her in one, but it's not strange either. She is a teenage girl after all, so it makes sense for her to own a few skirts. Minami then invites him to another part of the garden where the rose bushes are. Arata starts to feel more relaxed and takes the opportunity to ask her about her injury. Minami happily replies that her foot is almost completely healed, thanks to both Arata and her trainer's efforts. In fact, her trainer mentioned that she could resume tennis practice once they return from their trip. Arata smiles, relieved that things are finally looking up for her. But his gaze drifts to their surroundings again. The garden is filled with couples walking hand in hand, taking photos together. He quickly realizes this must be a popular date spot. A thought lingers in his mind as he wonders why Minami chose this place specifically. Suddenly, Minami asks him what his ideal bride is like. Arata panics a little, caught off guard by the question. When she casually explains that it's just curiosity from being surrounded by couples, he replies that he'd like someone he could feel at ease with, especially since he imagines he'll have a busy future. As he says this, he notices a tag still attached to the back of Minami's skirt. He points it out and offers to remove it for her since she can't reach it. He tries pulling it off, but it won't budge. He tells her that he'll try biting it off, which makes Minami visibly nervous. Still, she doesn't stop him, and he manages to bite the tag off. The two continue their walk, and Arata takes several photos of her along the way. After about 2 hours, Arata suggests heading back to the villa, thinking the rest of the family might be waiting for them to eat together. Minami, though disappointed, agrees. As they walk back toward the exit, Arata notices she's become more reserved. He wonders if maybe Minami had other reasons for visiting the garden. Suddenly, Minami admits she has a crush on someone, which catches Arata by surprise. At that moment, the skirt, the date spot, and the sudden personal questions all start to make sense. He begins to suspect that this whole outing was like a rehearsal for when Minami finally confesses to the person she likes. Arata asks her directly if she was using him for practice, concerned that his reactions might not have been helpful. But Minami nervously tells him that his responses were actually very helpful. She looks like she wants to say something else, but quickly covers it up by saying she's going to look for souvenirs and marches off toward the nearby shop. Arata watches her retreating figure, still a bit confused, but follows after her. At the shop, Minami tells him she wants to buy matching souvenirs for both of them and beams when he agrees. As she pays, Arata smiles, relieved that he was able to make her happy today. But just as his thoughts begin to settle, the memory of Uka's confession suddenly floods back into his mind. Somewhere in the future, a letter is being written, addressed to someone unknown. Still on their family vacation, the Shianji siblings visit a familiar river from their childhood. Because the girls are extremely attractive, a lot of men nearby turn to look in their direction as they prepare for a fun day. The boys assume they must be city girls doing a photo shoot, noting how attractive they look to be locals. After some time, Arata and Shiyun arrive, carrying the last of the things from their car. Shiyun casually mentions that his classmates once told him they'd be willing to pay a large sum of money just to spend a beach day with his sisters. He then remarks how lucky they are to be around such beauty every day, but Arata deadpans that he can't see them that way, having grown up together. Still, his gaze drifts to Uka, and tries to shake off any impure thoughts forming in his mind. The family finally settles down and begins to enjoy the day. As Banri and Seiha stay dry by the shore, Uka dives straight into the river from above the waterfall and ends up near Shiyun and Kotono, who are playing. Seiha, watching from the riverbank, teases Uka for possibly having a low IQ, saying it's typical of her to enjoy thrilling things. This prompts Shiyun to recall that Seiha herself used to jump into the river with Uka all the time when they were younger. Uka swims near Arata and asks if he'll be doing a high dive too. Arata, distracted by how she looks in her swimsuit, quickly averts his gaze and replies that he won't be jumping just yet. Uka then turns to Minami and asks her. Minami hesitantly admits that she'll do the jump if Arata joins her. Arata doesn't think anything of it and casually agrees, but Kotono silently watches their interaction with a tinge of jealousy. Reaching the top of the waterfall, Arata realizes just how high up they are. He's about to reconsider when Minami grabs his hand and pulls him forward as she leaps into the river below. When they emerge from the water, Arata hears another splash and turns to see that Seiha has finally joined them. He watches his siblings play and splash around, and for the first time in a while, he feels relief. Things feel like they've gone back to normal, back to the sibling bond they once shared. He briefly recalls the night their father revealed the truth and wonders how things might have been if he had kept it all a secret. Suddenly, Arata notices Seiha acting strange. When he swims over to her, she confesses that her swimsuit top had slipped off when she dove in. She asks for his help finding it, but she ends up spotting it first. As she begins to swim toward it, Arata scolds her and swims ahead to retrieve it instead, hoping to save her modesty. He hands it back, and as she quickly puts it back on, Arata tries to clear his head, silently berating himself for having impure thoughts. Seiha then gets out of the water and invites Arata to join her, casually wondering out loud if she owes him a compliment for earlier. Meanwhile, Banri gathers the girls to show them a unique way of preparing a barbecue by wrapping the meat in layers of foil, newspaper, and cloth. She announces that it will take another 10 to 15 minutes for the meal to cook, so she plans to swim while waiting. She invites Arata to come back into the water, claiming she doesn't want to go in alone. When they're both in, Banri tries to coax him into playing, but Arata complains that he's already been swimming with everyone else and is too tired. As she swims, Arata overhears a group of nearby guys making comments about Banri's figure. This prompts him to glance at her more closely, and he reluctantly admits to himself that among the sisters, Banri is probably the most attractive. Noticing her swimsuit, he realizes he probably should have said something earlier, as it doesn't seem appropriate for a family trip. Suddenly, he feels Banri press against his back, demanding to be carried as he swims. After a bit of coaxing, he gives in to her requests and starts wading through the water with Banri on his back. As they move along, Arata wonders aloud why he's always the one playing the boyfriend when Banri could easily get any guy she wants. Banri quickly replies that she's more worried about him than thinking about getting into a romantic relationship. Arata briefly considers bringing up what Uka did a few weeks ago, but decides against it. Instead, he tells Banri that he's working hard to become the kind of older brother who can protect her and the rest of their family. This makes Banri remember his words from a few months ago. They eventually swim close to the waterfall, and Banri insists they go even nearer to get better view. Arata complies, bringing them so close that they end up slipping and falling under the waterfall. When they re-emerge, Banri suddenly confesses that she likes him, but quickly plays it off as a joke, claiming she just wanted to see his reaction. Unbeknownst to her, Arata hadn't heard anything due to the roar of the waterfall. Banri smiles and begins splashing water at him, telling him to forget it. From the shore, Kotono quietly watches them, her expression uneasy. Later, Arata heads to the car and puts on a parka. Kotono approaches and tells him she's planning to go to the vending machine since they're almost out of drinks. She asks if he can accompany her. As they walk toward the vending machines, Arata remembers that the route is quite a distance from the river. The walk is mostly quiet, and he starts to wonder how much distance he should really keep from Kotono, since he is still hoping she'll eventually let go of her feelings for him. Deciding to break the silence, Arata reminds Kotono to be careful when she heads back to the river later, bringing up the time she nearly drowned when they were younger. Kotono frowns at the memory and tells Arata that she's already in middle school now, implying that she's not a child anymore. Arata glances at her and realizes just how much she's grown. Her figure is no longer childlike. She now has noticeable curves. The realization makes him uncomfortable, and it doesn't help that the memory of Uka's kiss suddenly resurfaces in his mind. He shakes his head, trying once more to forget it. They finally spot the vending machine, and as they approach, Arata mentally scolds himself for the thoughts he's been having. As they pick out drinks for everyone, the sun is almost gone, casting a warm orange hue over the path. Arata signals that they should head back, but Kotono hesitates. She opens her mouth as if to say something but closes it again, too nervous to speak. Arata grows concerned that she might be about to confess something and gently encourages her to continue. Kotono's shoulders begin to shake, and to his surprise, tears start streaming down her face. Arata panics, unsure of what he's done to upset her, but Kotono finally speaks through her sobs. She confesses that the reason Uka initially ran away had been her fault and explains that she had said something strange to her. Arata gently asks what she said, but when he sees how upset she is, he decides not to push further. Instead, he comforts her, telling her it's okay to make mistakes. That's part of being a younger sibling, after all. He assures her that no matter what, he and the rest of their family will always look out for her. As he places his hands on her shoulders and looks at her with kind eyes, Kotono is suddenly reminded of a much younger Arata. She remembers feeling out of place in the family, being the youngest with no clear responsibilities or talents like the others. Her father would usually give everyone instructions whenever they left, but hardly gave her anything to fulfill. She also does not have a close relationship with him. While her older sisters talked about chores or duties, she was often told that just being herself was enough. They didn't know this had made her feel left out and useless. She remembers a family vacation at the very same lake. She had fallen into the water, and while her sisters panicked and ran to find help, Arata immediately jumped in to rescue her. When they made it back to shore, she kept apologizing, but Arata had said it was his job to protect her because she was his little sister. From his spot on the ground, he had reached out and patted her head to comfort her. It was at that moment that Kotono realized Arata treated her differently, and that was when her feelings for him began. She had desperately wished that they weren't siblings so they could fall in love with each other. When they return to the riverside, Banri is the first to spot them, commenting that she didn't expect Arata to go with Kotono. She adds that they're now considering heading home. Arata complains slightly, wondering why they let Kotono go to the vending machine so late. But Banri just brushes it off, saying they can enjoy the drinks in the car instead. She even brings up their next big agenda of visiting a nearby church to light candles for an upcoming candle lighting event, which will happen the day after tomorrow. On the evening of the event, they are welcomed by a breathtaking sight, thousands of candles decorating every part of the church. Banri wonders aloud if there are more candles than before, and Seha confirms there are now 3,000. Even the forest surrounding the church is lit up with candles, creating a spectacular glowing view. The girls all agree that this is the perfect place to spend the last night of their vacation. Arata stares at the glowing candles, suddenly overwhelmed with nostalgia. It had become something of a family tradition to spend the final night of their trips here, in the same church, under the same warm lights. He reflects on how good this trip had been for all of them. Each one of them had needed this break to rest, to reflect, and to reconnect. He feels proud that despite the complications, they've maintained their balance and sense of family even now that they are older. For a brief moment, he truly believes that nothing could ever break their bond. As the others continue to enjoy the view, Arata wanders off, his thoughts drifting once again to Uka's kiss. The memory still burns in his mind. He knows he can't keep avoiding it forever. Sooner or later, he has to confront her about it. He begins to wonder what he would do if Uka actually confessed her feelings. Even if they're not related by blood, he isn't sure he sees her as a romantic partner. At least not now. And if that's the case, he tells himself that he needs to be honest with her before she lets her hopes grow any further. Just as he's lost in thought, Arata hears Kotono's voice nearby. Curious, he quietly moves closer and sees Minami, Uka, and Kotono gathered together. He quickly hides and listens from behind a nearby wall. Kotono is apologizing to them, her voice shaking slightly. Arata feels a surge of pride in her courage. She bows and explains the reason why she brought them there. She admits that she misunderstood a message sent by Minami that was deleted and jumped to the wrong conclusion. Though she meant what she said to Uka and everyone back then, she also acknowledges that she should have worded things better. She admits she won't let go of her feelings for Arata, but has no intention of making them her enemies. Moved by Kotono's sincerity, Minami chooses that moment to come clean. She confesses that she, too, has feelings for Arata. She tried to bury those feelings but couldn't suppress them any longer. Facing Kotono, she apologizes for not being honest sooner and declares that from now on, they're love rivals. Then, unexpectedly, Uka speaks up. She, too, confesses her feelings for Arata. Both Minami and Kotono are shocked. Uka admits it feels strange, especially since they spent their entire lives raised as twins. But deep down, she's always hoped that she and Arata could be more than just siblings. Minami, trying to hold everything together, says that in the end it's up to Arata to decide who he loves. Regardless of what happens, she tells them they're still her most important sisters. She makes them promise that no matter whom Arata chooses, they won't let it ruin their bond. Still hiding, Arata feels his heart pounding loudly. The other siblings are walking around the church, unaware of the agreement between Uka, Kotono, and Minami. In the future, someone writes that among them, there are those who are true siblings.